Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the southern United States. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. We got a great show lined up for you. Obviously, right now, the government is shut down. If you want to talk to us about that, you can do that now. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857 if you want to call and talk to us about the government being shut down. It's not good when the government shuts down. I will say that I'm going to have a lot of complaints for Republicans here coming up, but I do want to shout out Alabama's U.S. senators. They co-sponsored legislation. This was a month ago, right? So it was so that this wouldn't happen. And Democrats have done similar things when they have been in power, right? When you are the party in power, you do not want the government to be shut down, because government shutdowns are typically, not always, but typically blamed on the party in power. And so when we have had, there have been occasions where Democrats have introduced legislations to stop government shutdowns, which would continue funding the government like on a 2-week basis by just continuing to have CRs, continuing resolutions, when other budget measures are not approved. I think Democrats have tried to do that in the past, and now a month ago, because Republicans didn't want this egg on their face, they tried to do this. And so the legislation was introduced about a month ago by Senator James Langford, Republican of Oklahoma. The legislation would prevent the federal government from shutting down in the scenario that Congress does not enact all 12 required annual appropriations bills on time by triggering an automatic rolling 2-week continuing resolution to maintain funding at the previous fiscal year's levels. I'm reading right now some reporting by Alex Jobin in the Alabama Political Reporter. Alex does great work. You should definitely read his stuff when it comes up on the Alabama Political Reporter. While the CR is in place, while these continuing resolutions have been triggered by the Prevent Government Shutdowns Act of 2025, members of Congress would be required to stay in Washington, D.C. until the federal budget is complete, with no access to taxpayer-funded travel, extended recesses, or official trips abroad. Those same travel restrictions would also apply to congressional staff and officials from the White House Office of Management and Budget. Additionally, the terms of the CR would require legislators to meet daily, including on weekends, with only budget-related votes being held on the floor until all appropriations bills or a long-term CR are passed. And so when Republicans were in power, they didn't want to pass, any of these, types of legislations, or when Democrats had the Senate. Wait a second, hold on. Yeah, when Democrats had the Senate, Republicans wanted to pass this, Democrats didn't. And now Republicans hold the Senate, and they want to pass it, and Democrats don't, because Democrats feel like they have some amount of leverage right now. And they do, and they've got to really, and so now I'm going to talk about that. But what I hope is, I do hope, and we're coming up on the midterms, coming up in 2026, I hope that there is a real, genuine interest from both some Republicans and some Democrats to stop this, because most governments don't have this thing, right? I mean, you look at governments from all across the world, and like government shutdowns, that's just not a thing that happens in other places. And so it's like a uniquely kind of indication of dysfunction of the American government that we have this. And so I do hope that after this episode is over, we can agree to something like this, because that's needed, because government employees, military service members, and the American people who rely on these services should not be used, generally speaking, as pawns in, political games and stuff. And so, it is funny seeing Republicans now making that argument that, we don't want to shut down the government over policy disagreements when Republicans have been the ones doing that for, that's been basically exclusively why the government has shut down in the past is because Republicans have policy disagreements with the Democrats. And so now Democrats are doing it and Republicans are saying, oh, well, we don't need to do that. Okay, so I did want to mention that because I thought that was really interesting, and I hope something like that does get passed in the future. But Democrats do have a lot of leverage because what they are asking for is for the Republicans not to increase health care costs of Americans, which is what would happen at the end of this year if Republicans' budget stays the way that it is. And, and look, it's not unreasonable that Democrats are saying, I don't want to fund a government that doubles people's health care costs, right? That's not unreasonable. And so Republicans are trying to say that, oh, well, this is to fund health care for undocumented immigrants. And that is It really is. There are a lot of things that you can kind of massage and stuff, and this is really just a lie. It is just a lie, because there is a law in place that was signed by Ronald Reagan that says when a hospital gets somebody who is unconscious, is having emergency medical needs, they must treat them. Okay? And I think if you ask people about that, they say that's good. They say it's good that we live in a country where if you are unconscious and having a heart attack, the doctors will just begin trying to save your life instead of rummaging through your pockets to try to take money or look at your papers or see if you deserve treatment. If you have a heart attack, you should just get treatment. Now, it's bad that we live in a country where after that is done, you might become bankrupt and the hospital system is going to try to, squeeze you dry of all of your money. But I do think it is better than not that we live in a country where if you are dying, hospitals have to treat you. I think that's good. And so that does mean that immigrants are going to get treated at our hospitals, including, yes, undocumented immigrants. But that law is not even, the Republicans are not trying to repeal that law. What the Republicans' budget does is it says that hospitals that treat people, if one of those people that they are required to treat is an undocumented immigrant, then the federal government is not going to reimburse that treatment through Medicaid. Even though the federal government is requiring the hospital to give the care, the federal government is then not going to pay for the care that they require the hospital to provide. And so what does that mean? That means that the hospital is going to have to try to find try to fill those costs somewhere else. They're going to have to charge Blue Cross Blue Shield more money on everybody else's health insurance. They're going to have to do something to make up that cost because they're not just going to eat the costs. And in a lot of cases, especially for rural hospitals, they can't. And so this is obviously going to put more rural hospitals in danger of closure. We've seen dozens and dozens of rural hospitals across the country close because states are refusing to expand Medicaid. We've seen like a dozen rural hospitals close in Alabama because we haven't expanded Medicaid. And so that's what this is. That's what part of, and also that reimbursement for the legally required care of an undocumented immigrant by the federal government. It is just to remind, I just want to reiterate this so that if people are coming in on a part of the conversation that they're not misunderstanding me. The federal government requires hospitals to give emergency treatment regardless of anything. And so Republicans want to say, if the person who gets that treatment is an undocumented immigrant who cannot pay, then the federal government is not going to reimburse the hospital, while still making the hospital give the care. And also, that care that is issued to undocumented immigrants is like a fraction of a percent of the total things that we're talking about. The vast majority of the dollars in dispute are going to native-born Americans or lawfully present immigrants. And states that have not expanded Medicaid are most at risk. They are the most likely to have people who will suffer because of the Republicans' health care plan. We're in Alabama. Let's look at the numbers for Alabama. Alabama Arise has a really good fact sheet about this. They say that the enhanced advance premium tax credits that have made health insurance more affordable for hundreds of thousands of Alabamians are set to expire at the end of 2025. If Congress doesn't act, premiums for families, small business owners, and people who buy their own insurance will skyrocket, forcing many to give up their high-quality health coverage and leaving many of them uninsured. So what's at stake? 477,838 Alabamians are enrolled in marketplace coverage as of May 2025. 98% of those people receive those enhanced advanced premium tax credits to help afford their monthly premiums. The average marketplace premium in Alabama will increase. The average. That means, what does average mean? That means 50% of people will see increases higher than this, and 50% of people will receive increases lower than this. The average marketplace premium in Alabama will increase by 93%. That's nearly double the cost for working families already struggling to make ends meet. 130,000 Alabamians could lose health insurance if the enhanced subsidies expire. This loss of health coverage would cost Alabama $1.1 billion in economic activity and 10,000 jobs in 2026. This is not like this is a far off sort of thing. These tax credits are expiring at the end of 2025, and that's what's going to happen next year. In like 60 days. Who would be hit the hardest? Small business owners and self-employed Alabamians, more than 65,000 of whom receive their health coverage through the marketplace. Older adults and families with lower incomes would bear the brunt of skyrocketing premiums. For example, a 60-year-old Alabama couple making $82,000 would see their annual premiums for a benchmark plan increase. This is wild. And Republicans want to do this. A 60-year-old Alabama couple making $82,000 would see their annual premiums for a benchmark plan increase from $6,970. That's already a lot of money to pay, right? If you're 60 years old, you're making $82,000. If you're 62 years old and the two of you are only making $82,000, guess what? You probably don't have a whole lot of money for retirement. You're probably going to be working into your 70s. And so $7,000 a year is already a lot. That's like 10% of your income going to healthcare. But that's what it is now. That's the affordable version. Under the Republican plan, it would increase to more than $27,000 to $27,276. That is, that's crazy. Households earning as little as $15,000 per year for an individual or $32,000 per year for a family of four could be priced out of coverage altogether. And so the Democrats are saying, look, we are not going to fund a government that increases healthcare costs for 60-year-old couples making $80,000 a year by 4 times. We're just not going to sign on to that. And I think that's not unreasonable. That's not unreasonable. And so, look, that's what this is over. And don't let people trick you into anything else, into believing anything else. This is to protect the tax cuts for the ultra wealthy, so that we don't have to give health care to poor and working people. That is fundamentally what we're about, what this is happening, what this is going on here. We got a caller on the line from a 256 area code. Let's bring them on the air. 256 area code, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
It's Dwayne, Jacob, Adam.
Dwayne, thanks for
I wanted
calling
to talk
in. What's
about
on your mind?
yes. Well, the shutdown has caused a problem that's not unlike the problem that I dealt with to try to help with the bedridden when the hospitals closed. Sunday, when the shutdown took place, another thing occurred, y'all. And that was that senior citizens will no longer receive checks in the mail. Now, things were supposed to be set in place to saying that they would help these persons. The shutdown took a considerable amount of Social Security workers from these places that already didn't have enough, that were already too far away. And there is a likely chance between there being between 50 and 250 people across the state that will just not know what happened and not get a check in the mail. Are you following me there?
Right.
And the only, and this is my thinking is I wasn't there when these persons were kicked out of the mental hospitals, but I am alive today and able to tell you on the radio that this is potential to happen. And in North Alabama, the counties most at risk, that would be the persons over 85 years old that are single, that are not tech savvy, are in the rural areas of DeKalb, Marshall, and Morgan County. And I'm asking any church members that may have not seen an elderly person, or you just see them, just to make sure that they've got the number as to where to call to get things done if you didn't do anything else. Give them a phone call. Have you got me? Because they will have nothing. They may not even have a way to get anywhere, to have a card, to make a bank account. They may not have a family. My family, myself, if I was 20 years older, y'all, my father died in the line of duty as he was the enforcement director of the alcohol beverage control, y'all, and in pursuit, he hit power lines trying to chase someone running. And my grandpa and uncle died as a result of working in the logwoods and trees hitting them. So it would be very easy for me to be in that same position, not know what happened, and money has suddenly not come, and the current administration and state doing nothing about it.
Right.
And like you were saying, it's the persons in these situations and just the regular working people that are being harmed. And here's my thing. I just really don't see, if Tuberville were to be governor, that he will do anything except extend this and do what the Trump administration wants. So that's something to keep on your minds there, guys. And anyway, that's the main things that I was wanting to get across. And remember that Friday, HBO Max, The Alabama Solution, it will be on. And I understand that, I believe it's the 18th, there'll be some showings at the theaters in Huntsville.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, really looking forward to that. And I appreciate you, tipping us off about that some time ago and putting it on our radar.
Yeah. Appreciate it, Dwayne. Thanks for the call. If
you
want to get where he is,
go see it. Hey, take care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to get where he is, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. 844-899-8857. Give us a call. Let us know what you think about the shutdown. Let us know what you think about what we're saying about it, because I know that some of the stations that we are on, it's going to be what we're saying is going to be running pretty counter to what some of the messaging is. But, you can go and look this stuff up yourself, right? You can go and look what I'm saying up and verify it. And I hope that you do. And I hope that you ask people who are telling you otherwise, why they're not telling you what I'm telling you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to share a little bit of what AFL-CIO put out recently about this, because they talk about how they are definitely asking to fix this healthcare crisis. They're definitely asking to end this shutdown. And I'll just quote a little bit from AFL-CIO President Liz Shuler. The federal government is shutting down right now because President Trump and his administration chose chaos and pain over responsible governing. Now, countless jobs, the essential government services we all rely on, and the economy powered by a workforce are in jeopardy, all because the administration wants to take one more swing at wrecking the Affordable Care Act and throwing working people off our health care. So, they go on to talk about how there are hundreds of thousands of federal workers right now who are impacted. And there are federal contractors, including custodians, cafeteria workers, folks like that who do not have the assurance of back pay, right? So Washington politicians are not the ones really at risk. It's regular working people who are impacted. Folks like, our caller Dwayne just mentioned, people who are elderly, people who don't have strong support systems, people who are living on the margins. And we depend on these government services. We depend on these public services. We've already seen attacks on federal workers throughout, the last 6 months or so, right? We've had federal workers being fired, and then some of them rehired, and then some of them fired again. They've lost their union rights. They've lost their contracts, their voice on the job. And, it's just sickening to see so many working people used as pawns for these games. And like you mentioned earlier, to recognize how this is really a wealth transfer. We're going to take from the poorest to give to the richest. Now, what kind of sense does that make? Even if you don't care about the poor folks, shouldn't you want a thriving economy? I mean, don't you recognize that when you take from people, they're not going to be able to spend at your stores, right? They're not going to be able to shop in our economy. People who are already living paycheck to paycheck, which is the majority of people, especially here in Alabama. And something else I wanted to add, you talked about the impact of folks on the ACA marketplace, but it's going to drive up costs for everyone else, right? And that's something that's worth emphasizing. Even if you have great health care through a great union contract, right, your employer is going to be taking more of a hit. And next time you go to contract negotiations, better believe healthcare costs are going to be higher. And that's something you're going to have to wrestle with. And we've got a lot of jobs that are on the line, jobs in all sorts of industries beyond healthcare. We've seen a lot of the building trades losing jobs over the last several months. It's tough. It's tough what's going on. And I just really appreciate everyone who is trying to tell the truth about it.
Yeah, and the just to let people know, like, the mechanism by which that happens. Maybe you think, well, if somebody loses their health care because it costs too much on the marketplace and they opt not to keep paying that, and they just kind of drop out of the system, why would that then increase my health care? What does that have to do with me? And that has to do with you, because health insurance is a risk pool, okay? And we need young people, young people like me, right? I'm not on any medications. I have not had a surgery since I was like 18, and I had my appendix removed. And so I'm like very, very healthy, generally speaking. Obviously I could be in better shape, but on the whole, I'm like a generally healthy person, and I don't need a lot of health care. So you need people like me paying my insurance and, frankly, not getting a whole lot out of it. Or my employer paying insurance for me and not getting a whole lot out of it. Or people on the marketplace paying insurance and not getting a whole lot out of it. So that the risk is diluted. And you have people who are less healthy, who need more care, who can reap the benefits of everybody being in this risk pool together. If somebody like me, a young 29-year-old, almost said 25, a young 29-year-old guy, if I was on the marketplace, and my employer wasn't paying for my health insurance, there's, in all likelihood, there's a world in which I decide to not get health insurance for a year or two to save myself money. Well, then you have just lost that low-risk person who's paying in and not getting out. And so you have to distribute among everybody else. Everybody else has to increase their, the thing that they're paying in by a small amount. And if you have 100,000 people, and those are going to be the people who are going to be the first to go, right? The most likely to drop their health insurance when it gets too expensive are the people who don't need it most often. And so you're going to increase healthcare costs for everybody because the healthiest will drop out of the system. And so that's how that's going to increase your healthy individuals.
Yeah, and I just want to put a number on it because there's 179 million people with employer-based insurance, right? So a lot of people, majority of people. AFL-CIO estimates that we will be looking at $485 more per person per year. So if that's a family of four, that's nearly $2,000 a year, which, given how expensive healthcare already is, the idea that it's going to go up even more, even if you are not directly impacted by Medicaid or the ACA, right? Even if you have some great Blue Cross plan in Alabama through your employer, you're looking at more expensive healthcare for everyone. And, it's just the thing that really weighs on me is how many folks are going to die because of this? Because people are going to miss out on preventative treatment. People are going to miss out on medications they need. People are going to show up with emergencies and have to be treated, as you pointed out, right? Whether anyone's paying for it or not.
Right.
And how many are going to show up too late? How many people are going to be buried too soon because of this? This is the richest country in the history of the world.
Right.
And this is what we're doing.
Somebody asked in the chat, should single healthy individuals receive Medicaid coverage if they refuse to work? And I just want to, before I answer that, I just want to say that is not what the debate is about.
No.
With the shutdown. That's not that, because the Republicans have already pushed through their, what they want to do with respect to work requirements. That's done. That's done and that's over. And so this is just about, actually funding Medicaid. And funding the marketplace, the marketplace subsidies are really the big thing. And so that's separate from anything else that I'm about to say. But yes, everybody should get health insurance. We should have Medicare for all for everybody, and everybody should pay a little bit into taxes so that everybody can get health insurance, and so that we have to pay less ultimately, because if you have one single payer insurer, then that single payer can negotiate better for drug prices and bring drug prices lower, can bring medical costs lower. We pay the highest amount for healthcare in the world. Nobody else pays more for healthcare than we do in America, and we do not live longer. We do not have better care, generally speaking. We have some better things for cancers, but that's largely a result of research that is funded by the government. That's not, it's crazy. So yes, everybody should get healthcare. And then specifically, I believe in Medicare for all. I believe that we should have single payer life and health insurance, generally speaking. And then even more specifically, just on the Medicaid work requirement stuff, states have implemented work requirements for Medicaid, and the cost to administer those work requirements are more than the savings that you get from kicking off the 6 people who match the description of the 29-year-old person who doesn't, who's not working and just freeloading and living large on Medicaid, because Medicaid is not, you can't live on health insurance. How else are you going to, there's just so vanishingly few people that actually match that administering the work requirements, that takes labor, that takes administrative labor. And to do that, we have found in the states that have done it, costs more than the money that you save by kicking people off of Medicaid. And so it's just more fiscally conservative not to have these stupid work requirements. You save money and then you get people health care. And it's just crazy.
Maybe then they can go to work, right?
And maybe then they can go to work. Yes, maybe then they can go to work, because actually not having health care can prevent you from going to work, because if you don't have health care and you can't get your insulin and you can't get your whatever, then you become less able to produce and to labor. Okay, we got to take a break. Appreciate everybody listening. 844-899-TVLR if you want to call in. We're going to be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. Today, we've been talking about the government shutdown. If you want to talk to us about it, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We've also going to be talking to a union organizer from Texas about their campaign. Really excited about that. And more, like I said, if you want to be part of the show, the phone number is 844-899-8857. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online. In particular, at our website, TVLR.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining member of the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to TVLR.fm/donate or Patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, we got a bunch of cool merch for sale at TVLR.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then you should get your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that at TVLR.fm/contact.
That's right. We would love that and greatly appreciate that. So please do that. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. And we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us.
Last Week in Southern Labor is a segment that we do every week where we take a look at what workers in the southern United States are up to. Here's what they were up to from September 29th to October 3rd. In union elections, one of the functions of the government that is shut down right now is the National Labor Relations Board. So for the duration of the shutdown, we will not be able to bring you the latest union election filings, and union elections themselves will also be postponed. However, I do have one press release about an election that took place before the shutdown, but had not been certified yet, so I can go ahead and share that with you now, and that is that 41 workers at Breakthrough Beverage in St. Louis, Missouri, overwhelmingly voted to unionize with the Teamsters Local 600. The union said in their press release that the workers are seeking increased pay, better benefits, and safer working conditions. Breakthrough Beverage is one of the largest beverage wholesalers in North America, operating in 15 states, the District of Columbia, and Canada. The Teamsters represent hundreds of workers at Breakthrough locations across the country. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, now, in addition to violating workers' rights to a fair union election, and in addition to putting their workers in significant danger, as has widely been reported, Blue Oval SK in Kentucky, a battery manufacturing joint venture between Ford and South Korean company SK On, workers at the plant are alleging wage theft, saying they are required to do work tasks before they are allowed to clock in. They filed a lawsuit against the joint venture seeking back pay. Federal workers have also sued the government, trying to stop plans to permanently fire workers during the shutdown. We'll keep an eye on that. And in strikes and bargaining updates, Teamsters at United Natural Foods, UNFI, in Atlanta, Georgia, have unanimously ratified a first collective bargaining agreement that delivers significant wage gains for more than 225 warehouse workers. The union says the 5-year contract provides a 30% wage increase, Teamsters health care coverage, participation in the Western Conference pension plan, defined classification bidding, and Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a paid holiday. In the past year alone, more than 1,200 150 UNFI drivers and warehouse workers have voted to join the union. Since 2022, more than 2,700 workers have organized, bringing the total Teamsters representation at the company to over 5,000. The Atlanta warehouse workers voted to unionize last year. The AFL-CIO in Texas rallied outside a Dallas Wings game last week. The Dallas Wings is the WNBA team in Texas, to support the players as they negotiate a new union contract. Women's basketball has been increasing in popularity recently, bringing in more revenue, and the players are seeking more of that new revenue. A company came out with an AI actor last week, Tilly Norwood, and said that the actor, quote unquote, is seeking representation. The Actors Union, SAG-AFTRA, said in a statement that the union is opposed to the replacement of human performers by synthetics, and that this computer program doesn't solve any problem. It creates the problem of using stolen performances to put actors out of work, jeopardizing performer livelihoods and devaluing human artistry. The union reminded production companies that they should be aware that they may not use synthetic performers without complying with our contractual obligations, which require notice and bargaining whenever a synthetic performer is going to be used. In political and legislative updates, registered nurses at Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina, members of the National Nurses United, NNU, held a rally to sound the alarm on the hospital's poor performance in staffing, health and safety, and recruitment and retention, and meal and rest breaks. Nurses are concerned that these patient care issues continue as patients grapple with Medicaid cuts starting on October 1st. Unless state legislators act, these cuts will impact more than 3 million North Carolina patients, many in the state's western region. A new report by YouGov, Jacobin, and a couple other organizations polled messaging and party ID in 4 swing states and found that independents with a strong populist message generally outperformed Democrats. You can hit up Les Leopold or us if you'd like a copy of the report. We're going to be talking about that some more in overtime. So let us know if you'd like a copy of it. It's pretty interesting. The government is now shut down because Republicans don't want to keep healthcare costs low for poor and working folks. Several unions have issued statements about the shutdown, calling on Republicans to not raise healthcare costs and open the government. The Professional Aviation Safety Specialists, PASS, a union that represents 11,000 FAA and DoD workers who install, maintain, support, and certify air traffic control and national defense equipment, and more, said in a statement that a government shutdown could jeopardize the administration's plans to modernize the nation's air traffic control system. The union said that of the employees they represent, 60% will be on the job but not getting paid, 30% will be furloughed initially but subject to recall, and 10% will be furloughed. The National Air Traffic Controllers Association, NATCA, echoed those sentiments and added that certified air traffic controllers are classified under the law as accepted workers and are therefore required to work during a shutdown without pay, often subject to mandatory overtime, requiring many controllers to work 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. This leads to higher stress and fatigue, further complicating their ability to perform their essential duties. The National Association of Letter Carriers, NALC, reminded members and the public that because the post office is a self-funded agency, it remains open and operations continue as normal. A local president of the Union of Workers at the Social Security Administration in North Carolina spoke to a local news outlet about the strain that this shutdown puts on workers that she represents. IUE CWA members at GE in Kentucky were on CBS Evening News explaining how Trump's anti-immigrant policies were hurting their immigrant co-workers and their native-born co-workers. In internal union affairs, the North Carolina AFL-CIO passed a resolution encouraging affiliate unions to align their contract expirations with May 1st, 2028. And in listener submissions, we got a message that nearly 400 food service and hotel workers at Unite Here, Local 25, unanimously ratified a new contract in Danville, Virginia. No word on the contents of the contract or the employer, but with unanimous ratification, you have to imagine it's a pretty good one. If we missed anything, then get your union update in our roundup and let us know. TVLR.fm/contact or leave us a voicemail when we're off the air at 844-899-TVLR, and we will try to include it in next week's roundup. Also, just a reminder that we can't give you all of what happened last week in Southern labor on the radio, right? We have a limited time on the radio, so we have to condense and pull out the things that are really interesting. But there's also lots of really interesting things in the newsletter that's not on the radio. So if you want to get the newsletters, then subscribe to the newsletter. Comes to your in your inbox every Tuesday morning at TVLR.fm. Subscribe to the newsletter there. You will get the exhaustive version of Last Week in Southern Labor at TVLR.fm. We have our guest on the line now. Really excited to talk to him. Really excited to talk to this person. Topher White is an employee, a former employee. We're going to be talking about that too, at Specs Wine, Spirits, and Finer Foods in Temple, Texas, and a supporter of unionization with the Teamsters. Topher, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me on.
I really appreciate you reaching out to us. Obviously, our condolences go out to you for being fired in retaliation for your support for unionization. We're going to be talking about that soon, solidarity with you, and we hope that, we're able to do just a little bit to bring more attention to what's going on there. And so before we get to your firing and all of that stuff, for folks outside of Texas, can you tell us what Specs is? What kind of jobs are there at Specs? What do you do at Specs? I'm not familiar with this, and I don't think that many people out. Maybe it's just a Texas thing. I don't know. But what is the company? What kind of jobs are there, and what do you do?
Yeah, so Specs is just a Texas thing. I think most people, when they go to a liquor store, they expect a small family-owned package store. Specs is a corporate franchise liquor store chain. They're only in Texas. They've been around since 1962. And their claim to fame is one of the largest retail selections of wine in the country. My location had 3,000 wines. Our mothership in Austin had 8,000. In Houston, it had 12,000. So very large selections of wine and spirits and beer. So cashiers at the front, we have receivers, beer guy, wine guy, liquor guy, management, grocery. Some of the stores have delis that prepare fresh food. So it's a very large sort of event kind of place to go.
Gotcha. And so there's drivers for Specs, there are warehouse workers for Specs, and then they also have like front of house people that it's also kind of a restaurant. And so can you talk about what you do there?
So what I do is I run the wine department. At least I did run the wine department until this past Wednesday. So one thing I will say that is a positive about Specs is that you go to a liquor store, most of the time you're looking for what you're looking for. If you can't find it, you just search until you do. Specs does do a good job of hiring people who know this subject that they're talking about. So as someone who runs a wine department, I have wine credentials. I know wine very well. I'm a wine professional. The same is true of a lot of these Spec stores. They make sure that you know spirits and cocktails, that you know wine, that you know your respective subject if you're going to run a department. So if you come in as a customer, we can help you if you know absolutely nothing, or if you know a lot, we can help you. We can speak to that.
I love stores like that because I am so, I'm just such kind of a pleb, right? Like I don't have really any specialized knowledge in anything except unions. And so, when it comes to fashion, when it comes to food, when it comes to liquor and wine and alcohol, I'm just totally out, and I really need somebody to help me do that. And it takes it takes work to know like what's good, right? It takes time, it takes studying, it takes like caring about it. And so having those specialty stores, I love stuff like that. And so I'm sure that I would be a Specs customer in Texas. Now, if I need to go get liquor, I just go to the ABC store, which is run by the government in Alabama. And, we're told that grocery stores are like totally super communist, but Alabama has a state-run grocery store. We're not going to talk about that, but it's good. And it's always good. The ABC stores are good. Like they have good service and stuff. Anyway, so workers at a Specs warehouse in Dallas unionized last year with the Teamsters. I saw that. We have a segment that we do Last Week in Southern Labor. We just did it. We covered that. And you said that they just actually ratified their first union contract. We haven't, the Teamsters haven't put out any press releases about the contract, so I'm not sure what's in it. Could you talk to us about why they unionized and what they were able to win in their union contract?
So I can speak to a certain degree about it. I don't live near Dallas. Temple is about 2.5 hours south of Dallas, and there's only 3 or 4 warehouses in Texas. But I can tell you they unionized. I believe it was August of last year. Took them until last month to get a ratified contract. I recall reading in the Dallas Chronicle about them complaining about the hot environment of their warehouses in the summer. So no ventilation, no air conditioning, no fans. I have seen part of the contract. I can't speak to a lot of it. I'm not allowed to speak to a lot of it. I can tell you they received a pay increase. And one thing you see in union contracts that's pretty typical is not just your pay increase, but a guaranteed increase every year of a certain percentage. Yep. I know they received that. And I think a lot of people that are less familiar with how unions work, we talk about wage increases and benefits or even ventilation and safety standards. But the first thing a contract is going to provide for you is just cause and a grievance procedure. Now, Texas, like so many of the southern states, is an at-will employment state. And it sounds like it's supposed to be here for both the worker and the employer, but in reality, it just means they can fire you whenever they want to, for whatever reason they want to. And so I did see that there are grievance procedures listed in the contract. It's a 5-step grievance procedure, so it does protect these people from from retaliation and from sort of asinine reasons for an employer to say, "Hey, you're fired, get out."
Yes, and that is so important. The security that you can have in a union job where you have just cause protections is really such an important. I mean, even if nothing else changes on the job, it is absolutely worth it just to get a contract that lays out so that you can see in black and white, what is it exactly that is expected of me, and under what conditions can I be disciplined or terminated, and that being in black and white, and that being enforceable and not changed, right? Because lots of employers have like handbooks that kind of put it in black and white, but those are totally at the whim of the employer, and they can change them at any time for any reason or just not follow it, right? And because it's not a contract, it's not an agreement that they made, it's them telling you, this is what I feel like, right? This is how I feel like wielding my power over you. And a lot of times it'll say it explicitly that this can be changed at any reason for any time at the employer's sole discretion. And so having some accountability there is really super important. And that's one of the things that employers hate the most is losing a little bit of that power. And really, it's kind of a self-report, I think, frankly, because it's just saying that if you can't run a shop with just cause protections for your employees, then that just means you're not a good boss. That means you're lazy, you don't want to have to do work, and you don't want to have to be consistent, and you want to be a dictator. Like, you want to be a tyrant. That's kind of what you're telling me when you say that I can't run a shop with a union because it protects employees. Like, that just means you're lazy, you're a bad employee, or you're a bad employer, you want to be a tyrant. So those are super important things. Yeah. I'm sorry, did you have anything else that you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I think the failure to have grievance procedures and just cause just means as a manager, you don't want to have to take the trouble to manage people properly. It's so much easier to say get out as opposed to say let's discuss the issue. It really is just a silly procedure.
So you worked in one of those storefronts, and God willing, you will be back. The Teamsters have a pretty good track record of getting people back on the job after they've been fired in retaliation for unionization. So I hope you'll keep in touch with us and let us know once you get back on the job and, you're able to kind of put on a little grin as you walk back in. I hope you'll keep us in the loop on that. But you worked until Wednesday in one of these storefronts. Y'all filed to have a union election a while back, and actually your election was coming up a week from today, but now that election is, I don't know if you've gotten notice from the NLRB, but my understanding is that election and all the other union elections in the country are casualties of this shutdown, and they will be postponed. They will be postponed until the government reopens. So that's kind of a bummer, and I was just reading that, I just realized that as I was reading it. But can you tell us why y'all decided to organize? What made you want to, what made you say that we want to follow in the footsteps of our fellow workers in the warehouse and organize with the Teamsters?
kind of a big question. I mean, me in general, I'm very progressive. I'm very much a leftist. I'm pro labor, and this is Texas is not only anti labor in general, but I'm in an area, a Bible Belt area, very hyper conservative area. And so it's not really been on my mind until I heard about the Dallas warehouse. And I happen to have a customer that a lot of us know who works for the Teamsters. And so it was sort of a gradual thing that dawned on us. One of the issues I think that really got people going was a lot of employers have this tendency to spend a lot of money on employee recruitment, but not on employee retention. And so we had a cashier who was hired in at 14 an hour, young girl. And we had cashiers older, more experienced, still making $12.50.
Wow.
So when you have these situations where your employer's not paying attention to sort of the state of the union, you're going to have these issues that are going to occur. And once people are aware of, hey, you're making this and I'm making this and they're making that, and we haven't had raises in 2-3 years, it's really not hard to rally people. I mean, being a vote with in that situation is really an easy job. And so, I think I started talking with some buddies up at work about unionizing mid-July when all this happened at the Dallas warehouse. Specs stopped bargaining in good faith. The warehouse was talking strike. The Teamsters were papering all the stores. And I think Specs probably became very aware of my stance really early on in July. And it kind of went from there. We had our labor cards signed probably within 7-8 days. Overwhelming numbers for a store with only 14 non-management employees. And it went from there. Yeah, we had election set for October 11th. The NLRB, of course, is largely furloughed. And so that's going to affect it, unfortunately. But yeah, it was not hard to say, hey, we have all these very bad conditions. Part-timers have no benefits. Full-timers aren't getting wage increases. And Specs is a liquor store. We are one of the few types of employers in the country that during COVID, we were never shut down. In fact, we saw incredible increases. I mean, there was like a 320% increase in drinking in the country during the pandemic. So Specs has been making money hand over fist.
Wow. And so, you've laid out kind of some of the reasons for organizing and fixing some of those things, getting people raises, getting people benefits is what you would be pushing for in a contract. And working there, you have the numbers in your email to me. You said that our Temple location, just the Temple location, made $12 million in 2024. That puts our labor cost far below 5% in an industry where cost percentages range from 12 to 20%. And I can say, I know, having worked in a restaurant for 3 years, that in the restaurant industry, and I know that being kind of a liquor store, I would imagine labor costs are lower because it's not like you're not serving people, you're not going to the table, I don't think, or maybe you are, I don't know. But at least in the restaurant that I worked at, 30% was the labor cost goal, right? And so for your labor costs to be 5%, there's room to grow there. They have the money to pay you more. They have the money to give you some benefits. And so I don't know if you want to speak any more to that specifically, but I find that especially in service sector jobs, people hear folks who are trying to organize for better conditions on the job, and they think, oh, well, that's a service sector job. There's not very much money to be made there. The margins aren't very high, and the workers don't deserve much. And it's like, well, the workers are creating, at your location alone, literally millions of dollars, and you're only taking back 5% of that. There's a lot of room to grow there, right?
Yeah, it's very insulting. I mean, the $12 million on its face is insulting. I was a restaurant manager for years, and yes, 30% cost was what we were happy to have at most for labor. And then, the public filings for labor consultants, the so-called union busters, these are public filings. And I generated a document about this for the employees to see what they're spending on these union busters. And last year, they reported $545,000 in filings for these labor consultants. So you think about the $12 million they're making in the store and the $500,000 they're going to spend to prevent us from unionizing. We're talking 14 employees. And I don't want to speak to the specific numbers in the contract we're talking about presenting, but it's almost insultingly low how little these employees want as a function of how much Specs could actually provide.
Yeah. Right. And that also really goes to illustrate how, the greedy union member trope is so far from reality, because I have never seen even opening offers, and opening offers are always made with the anticipation that you will not get everything, right? But even all of the opening offers that I have ever seen in a union negotiation, they're always opening offers that the company could meet. And actually, in all probability, if the company met them, it would probably be good for the company, because they would generate more loyalty from their workers and be able to get more productivity out of them and blah, 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 right? But then the workers are always willing to go under their opening offer. And so you've seen your coworkers in the warehouse organize. You've seen them get better working conditions. They got a raise. They got just cause protections on the job. And so you and your coworkers in the storefront want the same thing, basically. I mean, not exactly the same thing, presumably. You've got different needs in the storefront than you do in the warehouse, but you want also to make your working conditions better. So you want to organize. And how has the company responded to this?
Well, they responded pretty abruptly. So the first thing they did was they installed a TV in our break room that plays nonstop slideshows of anti-union propaganda. They brought in 2 union busters pretty early on, Oscar Wilmington and Kirk Cummings, who they've worked with before. And these are some of the fellows they paid so much money to in the past for the Dallas warehouse. And, unfortunately for Specs, they've also done a lot of illegal activity that we've been documenting pretty heavily. A lot of unfair labor practice violations we've already filed. One-on-one meetings, which are not permitted. I've been getting video footage of these meetings. I've been getting recordings of the meetings. I'm getting signed statements about the meetings. They've been removing pro-union material from the break room. And I think they're under the impression they're allowed to do this. The actual rule is you can remove it, but not selectively. If you have this clean break room with just work material, you can remove anything you want. But if you allow people to have their own personal stuff in there, coupons, memes stuck to the wall art, business cards, you can't take away union material. So every time they do it, I document it, I replace it, they remove it, I document it, they remove it, or just so forth and so on. I'm just rack these things up.
Right.
And I like to print any email I send. If I think there's a policy that's wrong, I email HR. Let's see what your response is. If I don't get a response, I'm going to document that. So it's been almost a game for me to say, how dumb are you? Because I'm going to document everything. These conversations, they think these cashiers are easy to persuade. Maybe they think they're dumb. Yeah. They walk into these meetings with these labor consultants, these union busters, and they record the meeting and they send it to me. So we have so much information. And one of the constant themes is, how dumb does Specs think we are? They don't respect us. They have no respect for us. And that's sort of obvious in how they're responding to our requests here.
I will also say, just to make sure that it's clear for the audience, that you said that if there's a break room policy of it being clean, then they can take down union materials. That's true, but they can't change the policy during a union campaign, right? So if before the union campaign started, you could put up memes or announcements, or like your daughter has Girl Scout cookies that she wants to sell, and you've always been able to put that up, and then as soon as the union campaign starts, then they say clean break rooms, no anything posters. That's also a violation of the NLRA. You can't change policy during the union election. But as you said, if there was a clean break room before the union campaign started, then the break room can remain clean. But it doesn't sound like that was the case there. And I also just want to point out, as an ironic thing, because one of the union buster things to say about unions is that we protect workers from accountability. Poor performing workers, Specs is now continuing to pay to pay union busters that they paid $500,000 to, who lost, right? I mean, Specs gave them $500,000 for the purpose of preventing their warehouse workers from unionizing, and then the warehouse workers unionized. And now they're still paying them. I mean, that's like poor performance for the union busters, and they're still getting paid hand over fist. I mean, that's just a funny thing. I think they literally failed at their job, and they're still getting paid hundreds of dollars an hour. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. Getting paid hundreds of dollars an hour to tell you that you need more accountability, and that's why you don't need a union. Presumably, that's one of the things that they're saying. I don't know. Have your coworkers thought about that? How these people they were poor performers and they're still getting paid.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that people are noticing is, the new tactic now, because the NLRB has been so rough on the busters for good reason over the past few years, is now their tactic is always to be super saccharine. I'm your best friend. I want what's best. Yeah. Let's just sit and talk. Let's chat. Right. How you doing? I'm going to buy you lunch. And then over time, I assume the real ploy is we're going to build a rapport. I'm going to drop little bits of information here and there, and maybe it's going to become this worm in your brain that makes you have doubt and anxiety. But pretty much all of our employees are just annoyed by them. They're friendly because they feel like they have to be, but I'll get messages constantly. These people are annoying the shit out of me. I don't like them bringing me in the office. They need to leave me alone. No one really seems to enjoy them. It's become kind of a hassle when they installed the propaganda in the break room. People just stopped eating in the break room. And then whenever I was terminated, the one holdout we had in the store might now be a yes, just because this individual was so outraged by what they did. And so everything they've done has created cohesion, the exact opposite of what they intended. And that itself is good news. I think the reality, though, is that Specs is going to consider what they have to pay me in back pay, the subsequent lawsuit for wrongful termination. That's far less than they pay union busters. This is the cost of doing business, hiring somebody, having to bring them back, having to pay them back pay, having to pay out a lawsuit. This was an acceptable risk for them financially. But then you think about it, had they not done this, all the money they're spending, if we had a contract, is more than they would have spent on what we wanted over the next 3 to 5 years anyway. So there's this really strange paradoxical nature to the fight on Specs' behalf in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. That risk is, unfortunately, right now, under the current labor laws, they see it as a cost of doing business because it is illegal to do what they did. To fire you for your union activities is illegal under federal law, but the consequence of that is not huge fines. It's not jail time. It's not a revocation of their business license. It's not a forfeiting of the right to own the business to the workers, which, that's something that we should consider, I think. But the consequence for violating the law in that way is just to give you back pay, which, as you said, is not as much as they're paying these union busters. And so, they just, when companies do these things, they're just kind of throwing the dice. They're like taking a gamble and hoping that when this stuff happens, that it intimidates your coworkers. And, if it does, then that's great. And maybe they hire you back and they still pay you back pay, but ultimately they win the union election by getting workers to vote against the union. And so it was a gamble worth taking. And then if they don't, and your coworkers still vote to unionize, then it's whatever, they pay you back pay and no harm, no foul, basically on their on their balance sheet. It's a totally broken system of labor laws, and that is why worker power is the thing. That is why the thing that is really going to save you is your coworkers and them unionizing and getting a good union contract and being able to bring you back that way. It's not the thing that's going to save people. It's not ultimately labor law. So. It sounds like you're predicting a yes vote whenever it happens. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'd be very surprised otherwise. I mean, initially we had 14 out of 15. I think we may have a chance of having the entire solid block. Even if we lose one or two, and I don't think that's the case, but even if we did, obviously that's still a pretty good win. But right now, the important thing about winning this election is not just winning, but also having an overwhelming number of votes is going to really look good when we go into the bargaining phase, contract negotiations, when you come in and you have a solid block of voters that are a yes. It's a little harder to sort of delay the good faith negotiation portion on Specs' part, I think.
Yeah. Well, Topher White, former employee and future employee at Specs Wine, Spirits, and Finer Foods in Temple, Texas, a supporter of unionization with the Teamsters. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you would like to leave the audience with before we let you go?
Just understand that unions are there to help employees. If you don't understand it, do the research. At the end of the day, we're trying to get better wages, better benefits, grievance procedures, maternity leave, the things that companies can afford, and just show solidarity where you can.
Thank you so much for your time. Good luck.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break, folks. We'll be right back. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. If you want to talk to us about the interview that we just did, you want to talk to us about the shutdown or anything else, 844-899-8857. We'll be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Appreciate y'all tuning in. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the chat. If you haven't liked the stream, go ahead and do that. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to our newsletter at tvlr.fm. We have 2 of those. Boss Watch goes out on Monday mornings. Last Week in Southern Labor goes out on Tuesday mornings. We were having a conversation earlier, and I mentioned in passing that I'm 29 years old, and somebody in the chat said, 29? I thought you were in your 30s. Gah! Wow. That's crazy. That was, like, why am I getting strays? In my 30s? Come on. That's so old. Do I sound like I'm old? Like an old man? I hope not.
I hear what you're saying.
And I love how Ben put the camera on Adam when I was saying that.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, I'm damn near 40 now. You got to round up after 35. You just round right up. So I feel it.
Oh man. My knees have been hurting though, like unironically. I've been trying to work out more because I'm feeling so lethargic and like just so tired recently. Recently for the past few years. And so for the past 2 months or so, I was like, okay, I'm going to work out for 15 minutes, 30 minutes every morning. I'm not going to do much. I'm going to do like 2 reps of push-ups. I'm going to do a couple of jump squats, something like that, just to kind of get my heart moving a little bit, you know, and like for like a month, I really felt a sort of difference, you know, like I just, in my feeling, you know, I didn't look any different, but I felt a lot better.
It does help.
But then my knees started hurting, and then I had to, stop for a little bit or modify and stuff. And so that's crazy that just like a month of like, I'm working out 15 minutes in the morning and my knees start hurting.
It only goes downhill from there, brother.
Yeah.
Enjoy it while it lasts.
Whoa! Free American in the chat says Adam looks younger.
Oh, wow. I'll take it.
Damn.
I mean, coming from Free American also, you know, not many compliments from Free American typically. So thanks.
Wow.
I guess.
Wow. Union Gus says ran my first marathon at 40.
Now that
is impressive.
That is really impressive.
That is incredible. Congratulations. Give it up for Union Gus in the chat. Running a marathon at 40. That is seriously great. That is no kidding. That's super congratulations. I ran I've only run one marathon, and it was when I was 18. I've had some people tell me that 18 is actually like a little bit not healthy to run a marathon that young, because you're still kind of growing. But I did. And then I got super out of shape. After I ran my first marathon. Quirky Geek Girl says, congrats. Did you do it in 4 hours? Union Gus, presumably that's at you. My marathon time was 3:42:43. 3 hours, 42 minutes, 43 seconds. Something like that. So I feel pretty happy with my marathon time. I could not do that now. Like 4 years after my marathon, when I was in college, I took a PE class because I needed just another class for my to keep 12 hours because I had a scholarship. So I took a PE class, and I was like, I'm going to see if I can run a 6-minute mile still. Even though I haven't worked out in 4 years, can I still run a 6-minute mile? Spoiler, I could not. I ran an 8-minute mile, and I almost threw up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Well, Union Gus is out here doing it at 40, so
yeah,
better keep up. Bad guys are working out.
Oh, okay. Oof. Free American's taking the compliment back. He was saying Adam does not look like he was in his 40s. I was not comparing y'all. Both of y'all look young.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, yeah, appreciate you.
Okay. 844-899-TVLR if you want to call in. We're going to be talking some more about the shutdown in the second half of the program. We got a guest that I had a guest lined up. He confirmed like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he wrote a piece basically saying, you know, and I don't think you can go and read it. It's in Sublation magazine, Why I No Longer Believe in Union Reform. And yeah, I mean, the title kind of lays it out. He doesn't think that, we should be spending time like trying to build a militant labor movement. He thinks it's kind of a waste of time and stuff. And so like we asked him to come on the program and like, have a conversation about it, because obviously we disagree, right? But I haven't heard back from him since, I confirmed with him like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then I sent him the Zoom link a couple of days ago. So hopefully he still comes. But if he doesn't, then we'll just read the piece and react to it. But that's what the thumbnail's based on. So we'll be talking about that in the second half of the program. Going to be talking some more about the shutdown, stuff like that. 844-899-TVLR if you want to call in. Let's do Boss Watch before we leave the radio. Boss Watch is a segment that we do every single week where we take a look at what laws bosses are breaking in the South. So we start in Georgia, where the U.S. Department of Labor cited a Florida painting contractor for willfully exposing workers to fall and drowning hazards. Investigators with the department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration determined that on April 7th, 2025, Seminole Equipment Incorporated bridge painters were removing scaffolding from the southbound I-95 bridge on the Ogeechee River when one worker fell into the river and drowned. The agency concluded that the Tarpon Springs, Florida-based employer failed to ensure employees used fall protection and life jackets while working on the bridge section. A critical piece of our mission to put American workers first is ensuring they are safe and protected on the job, said Secretary of Labor Lori Chavez DeRemer. No American should go into work fearing they might not make it home at the end of the day. OSHA is taking concrete enforcement action to stop preventable tragedies. The Department of Labor is committed to protecting our nation's workforce by holding bad actors accountable, said Deputy Secretary of Labor Keith Sonderling. We will continue addressing careless practices when we see them to achieve our shared goal of safe and productive workplaces for all Americans. OSHA cited Seminole Equipment Incorporated for 5 willful and 3 serious violations and proposed $877,000 in penalties. The agency also issued 2 serious violations to the L.C. Whitford Company, the controlling employer for the site, and a proposed penalty of $26,000. Heading to Alabama, WorkSmart Staffing LLC, a regional staffing agency in the southeastern United States headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina, violated federal law by discriminating against a class of females when it failed to hire or refer them to available positions, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission charged in a lawsuit last week. According to the EEOC's lawsuit, from August 1st, 2020 to August 8th, 2023, WorkSmart failed to hire or refer a class of aggrieved females for laborer positions because of their sex at 2 of the company's offices in Hoover and Leeds, Alabama. The EEOC's complaint charged that one of WorkSmart's clients requested male laborers only for their facility, and that WorkSmart complied with the client's discriminatory request. Federal law protects applicants and employees from discrimination based on sex in hiring and job assignments, and the EEOC is committed to enforcing and remedying unlawful sex discrimination, said EEOC Birmingham District Director Bradley Anderson. Such alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination because of an individual's sex. The EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Alabama, Middle Division, after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement via its conciliation process. The EEOC is seeking back pay, front pay, compensatory damages, and punitive damages for the affected females, as well as injunctive relief to prevent future discrimination. Marcia Rucker, regional attorney for the EEOC's Birmingham District Office, said, "Unfortunately, some companies engage in sex-based hiring practices that have no place in today's workforce. The EEOC remains vigilant to prevent sex-based hiring practices across all sectors of employment." Over in Louisiana, the Coca-Cola Bottling Company, the 3rd largest bottler and distributor of Coca-Cola products in the United States and headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama, violated federal law by failing to accommodate an employee with a disability and then firing him because of his disability, the EEOC charged in a lawsuit last week. According to the lawsuit, the employee, who worked as a delivery driver for the company in Lafayette, Louisiana, was diagnosed with renal disease requiring undergoing dialysis. After he asked for a change in his work schedule to accommodate his dialysis, the company determined he could not work a different schedule as an accommodation and told the employee to apply and compete for other jobs in the company aligned with his medical restrictions. The employee identified and applied for a job with a schedule allowing him to continue dialysis while working full-time. However, even though he qualified for the position, the company refused to place him into the position and then terminated him in August 2022. Employers must provide employees with disabilities reasonable accommodations absent undue hardship, said Michael Kirkland, director of the EEOC's New Orleans field office. The EEOC will diligently investigate and, if necessary, file suit against employers that violate the rights of their employees. Such alleged conduct violates the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits disability discrimination in employment. The EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Louisiana after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its administrative conciliation process. Elizabeth Owen, a senior trial attorney in the EEOC's New Orleans field office, said it's critical for employers to understand that they have an affirmative legal obligation to make reasonable changes to an employee's work environment to accommodate an employee's disability. When an employee can no longer perform the essential duties of his current job, reassignment to a vacant position may be a reasonable accommodation under the ADA. And this segment of Boss Watch Union Busters covers national updates. It's sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that union busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. Here are the new filings from this week. Centurion of Maryland hired Healthcare Labor Solutions. Workers won that union election 27-20. Even though they had union busters, but the union busters did not file until after the union election was over. The Louise Dreyfus Company in Indiana hired Government Resource Consultants of America. Workers still won that union election 66-16. Oh, wait a second. I think I'm reading the old one. Sorry about that. Give me just a second while I pull up the correct one.
Yeah, no worries. I wasn't on last week, so it was news to me.
Okay, here it is. So Amazon in Illinois hired North River Consulting via Road Warrior Productions for $250 a day. That's actually not that much for a whole day. Maybe that's supposed to be an hour. Fresh Point Central in California hired Action Resources for $4,000 a day. That union election is open. Dartmouth Hitchcock Health in New Hampshire hired labor educators for $400 a day. DTE Energy in Michigan hired Greer Consulting for $475 an hour. And Park Auto in Indiana hired Lewis Labor Relations. They did not include a compensation amount. That's going to conclude the first half of our program this morning. We really appreciate everybody hanging out with us. We're going to be continuing. We got a whole, for folks who just listen to us on the radio or you're just tuning in on the radio, we have a whole second half of the program that is that's online first. Where actually the second half of the program, portions of it are on a couple of radio stations. But if you want to hear it live, you can find us on Facebook and YouTube at The Valley Labor Report. We're going to be answering the question, should we give up on building a militant labor movement? We're going to answer that question in the second half of the program, so find us on Facebook and YouTube, The Valley Labor Report. We're also going to be talking some more about the government shutdown. We're going to be talking about retaliation against last week's guest. One of the guests that we had last week was a fair housing lawyer for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. He was fired a couple of days after he came on this program. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about a new report that says that maybe you should run as an independent instead of a Democrat. interesting results. We'll be talking about that soon. We'll also take your calls, 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. Adam, we've got, I think, 30 seconds left. Did you have anything that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I just want to remind folks we are really proud that we've joined Means TV. So we are on Means TV, and you can subscribe to Means TV with our discount code TVLR and receive 20% off either your first month or the entire year. They've got a lot of great programming coming up. Really excited about some of the documentaries they have in the works. Pleasure to be working with Means TV. We need more worker media, so give them a like and a subscribe. We would appreciate it.
Means.tv. Subscribe. Use promo code TVLR. You get 20% off your first month or your first year. Thanks for listening, folks. If you don't follow us online, Facebook and YouTube at The Valley Labor Report, then we'll see you on the radio next week. All right. We're off the radio. Appreciate everybody hanging out. Looking forward to the second half of the program. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host here is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. We'll take your calls live on the air while we are live on Saturday mornings. And if you catch us anytime other than while we're live on Saturday mornings, you can always leave us a voicemail, and we might respond to it on the next week's program. We got some... I wanted to give you an update from one of last week's guests. But before we do that, Adam had a couple of plugs.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure folks were aware of a couple of things going on, particularly from Labor Notes. There are several upcoming troublemaker schools that are happening across the country and in Canada. I know we have a few Canadian listeners out there, so there is a Toronto Troublemaker School on the calendar for October 18th. That's coming up soon, so check that out. But a little closer to home, New Orleans is having a Troublemaker School on December 6th. That will be at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. That will be at the IATSE Local 478 office. So I know we have some listeners down in the New Orleans area. Make sure you check that out. Put that on your calendar. Here in Alabama, we are working on a Fight Back Summit in Tuscaloosa. That will be Saturday, November 1st. And we should have the registration page up for that here very shortly. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for that, those of you who are more local to Alabama. And wherever you're at, definitely check out some of the online trainings that Labor Notes always puts on. The Stewards Workshop this month is on Just Cause, which is very, very relevant for the conversations we've been having today, for the conversation you're about to have about our former guest. So that is a really important one to check out. This is ideally for stewards or officers who, handle discipline cases. But Just Cause is, the keystone of the union contract. So really important training. That's on October 27th, 6:30 p.m. Central. And I think that was those were the main highlights from Labor Notes I wanted to share. For those of you who are in Alabama, there will be a couple of online sessions from Alabama Arise about the impact of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, so-called. And so there will be some discussion about the impacts on healthcare and SNAP and other programs. So go to alarise.org to find out more about that. And if you have anything interesting going on, if you run across some interesting events, webinars, trainings, and you think we should know about it, do let us know. tvlr.fm/contact. Would love to have other people help me stay in the loop on what's going on, especially training and history, events like that. We're going to be talking later about this new report on working class politics. We were lucky enough to attend the webinar and just happened to be on the right list, right, and come across that. Wasn't something I necessarily knew about very far in advance, but yeah, keep us posted on events and go to labornotes.org/events to learn more about theirs.
Yep. We've got some almost 50 people watching the program live now, and only 25 of y'all have liked the stream. So go ahead and like the stream if you haven't yet. Subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. Last week, we talked to attorney Paul Osadebe from the Housing and Urban Development Department, HUD, about his allegations as a whistleblower that HUD is violating its statutory duties. The HUD Fair Housing Office has been tasked by Congress to enforce fair housing laws, to enforce anti-discrimination laws. And Paul Osadebe, in his whistleblower complaints that were filed with the Office of the Inspector General, with the Senate, and which were then made public to the American people, say that HUD is ignoring those policies. He brought forward cases that he said they wanted to pursue that were very clear that laws were being violated, and demonstrated how HUD was stopping them from pursuing those cases, right? We had a whole conversation with him. I think he was on our program for like 30 minutes. You can go back and check all of that out just for the details of the cases and how they were being stopped, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the news this week is that only a couple of days after we had him on this program, probably not because he was on this program, probably more likely because he was in the New York Times and stuff like that. But on that Monday, he was fired. He was fired for telling the American people the truth. And that is explicitly, he was on recently the Real News Network with Max Alvarez. I recommend folks checking it out, checking out that video and that article. I dropped it in the chat. You can read that. Max, friend of the show, the voice of the Valley Labor Report. He does our intro. He interviewed them shortly after they were fired. And there's some good stuff in here. But Max took pains to ask that, Max says, just to be crystal clear, both of you were told explicitly by your superiors that you were being terminated or recommended for termination because of your whistleblowing activities. And Paul said, yes. And, and Max points out that, these guys are both attorneys, they're not going about this super willy-nilly. They're attorneys. They read through the statute. They read through their whistleblower protections. They crossed their T's and dotted their I's. Palmer Heenan said, we took great pains to make sure that the information we were disclosing was accurate. We made sure that it was documented, and we made sure that it fell within the boundaries of what we were permitted to disclose as whistleblowers. That is what we spent time, days, and weeks doing, making sure that the information that we were going to tell was true and accurate. And you're right, there are protections. There are constitutional protections for speaking out as an American citizen. The First Amendment exists and protects the right of every American to speak out, but there are also statutory protections that exist specifically for federal employees who blow the whistle. That's because the American public deserves to know if their government is breaking the law. The American public deserves to know if their government is using taxpayer dollars to subsidize discrimination. The American public deserves to know if their constitutional or legal rights are being taken away. And as a consequence of that, there are statutes that exist that allow federal employees to do exactly what Paul and I did. This is still Palmer talking. And we made sure that we were within the boundaries of what we were allowed to disclose and that the American public deserves to know. And so this is super they're not even trying to hide it. They said, you went public with this information and that is why you are being fired. A blatant violation of whistleblower protections for folks who work in the federal government. And, just another sign of this creeping authoritarianism. There's not really another way to say it other than that is what the Trump administration wants to be. They want to be an authoritarian government that people are not allowed to criticize or critique or blow the whistle on when they violate the law. They want to be able to violate the law with impunity. And so they're doing everything that they can to punish people who do speak out when the government violates the law. It's just such a gross thing that's happening here. And I obviously feel for Paul and Palmer. Hopefully they'll be all right. They're attorneys, they're capable. And so hopefully they'll be able to find somewhere else to work as they wait to get reinstated because, this really is super clearly illegal retaliation and unlawful termination. And so they are hoping, their unions are hoping, they're both members of the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 476. They did have their steward in the meeting with them when they were terminated. And so they are going to be filing grievances. They are going to be trying to get back on the job. Hopefully they'll be able to find something to do in the meantime to make a little bit of money. But really super concerning things, and if you're a conservative and you're listening to this, you need to tell your congressperson and your senator that this concerns you, right? Because when people, when people like me reach out, and especially if they have any idea about who I am or where I come from, Republicans are like, they just don't care. So they need to hear from conservatives who care about the rule of law. And so I would encourage people to let their representatives in Congress know that you care about this. I don't know if there's anything else that you had that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's really concerning when whistleblowers are being targeted, because it just is going to be a chilling effect on other potential whistleblowers, right? How many people aren't going to take that risk? And they're just going to try to keep their head down and hope that, everything works out eventually. And then how much wrongdoing will we not know about?
Right.
As a result? I think that's, a huge concern for any agency. And it's happening not just in HUD, obviously, but, this is a new reality, I think, for a lot of federal workers. And, that's why they're trying to take away federal workers' unions and take away the contracts and strip these workers of their voice on the job. But I would just encourage folks to keep organizing and keep organizing. The Federal Unionist Network, I know, is doing a lot of great organizing right now. And, building collective power, even without a recognized union, is definitely possible and more urgent and necessary than ever, probably.
Yep. So I'm assuming that we don't have Matt in the Zoom. Bummer. I don't know. I don't think that I was weird in my email, and I don't think that I've been unnecessarily confrontational. I made it clear that I disagree with him. I made it clear that I disagreed with him when I invited him on the program. So, I wouldn't have thought that my, conversation topics would have been a surprise. But nevertheless, it is what it is. Maybe he just, maybe something came up. I'll assume the best. So Matt Cavagrati he wrote a piece for Sublation magazine. He is currently an IT professional based in Knoxville, Tennessee. He previously worked at UPS, where he served as a shop steward with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Local 519 for 7 years. Matt studied history at the University of Tennessee, focusing on the history of organized labor and its intersection with socialism in the United States. He is also a longtime member of the Platypus Affiliated Society. So he wrote this piece for Sublation magazine, Against the Machine, Why I No Longer Believe in Union Reformism. And so he talks about how he was kind of looking for a job, and he had a friend respond, how about a job with decent pay and incredible benefits where you can build socialist revolution at the same time? Talking about working at UPS and being a member of the Teamsters and trying to build the labor movement in that way. And so, he talks about how he decided, that's an interesting offer. I'll take it. He said that, that because of his affiliation with the Platypus Affiliated Society, which he describes as a Marxist group with chapters on many college campuses, I was skeptical, he says. Platypus contends that the left is not merely weak, but dead, and that any revival must begin from that recognition. So I was guarded against most forms of activism. And I think that this is kind of, you start to show a little bit here, you're guarded against most forms of activism. Well, then what's the, what's the proposition? What
does the left do if not active?
Yeah. If not activism. Yeah. I don't know.
I'm already a little confused, but
So I was guarded against most forms of activism, including any attempt to reboot the New Left's failed turn to industry of the 1970s. But the job met my needs and the historical tension intrigued me, so I took it. I called it bluff. And, this is again, I'm already, as I'm reading this, describing the New Left's turn to industry as a failure. As opposed to what? The New Left's turn to culture, which worked so well? The cultural left, all of that, that worked so great. Obviously, the turn to industry did not result in a proletarian revolution or whatever. But, like, there were, there were results there. People's lives were improved, and some unions were made more militant for a time. So anyway. Let's see. I really hate that he's not here because I don't want to just read the whole piece. I don't want to, I'll drop it in the chat so folks can read it. I don't know if I should read the whole piece or if I should. I got it. I already got it. I don't know if I should read the whole piece or not. I don't know if that's poor taste to read the whole piece. Let's see how many words it is. It's kind of a long piece. I don't think I have time to read all of it. Let's see. What is the word count of this piece?
Yeah, for me, I think I'm just curious kind of what the alternative is. Because I've made the calculation that worker power is critical to any sort of progress. In this country, in this state, in this world, it requires more power for working people. And so if you accept that premise, it makes sense that unions are an important vehicle to that end, right? I mean, these are literally organizations of workers and only workers. You could argue about, the top layer of union leadership and whether they're still grounded in the shop floor struggle. That's another conversation. These are organizations that are imperfect, but they are tools of the working class. And so I think if you acknowledge that workers need more power, and that is key to winning a better world, then I'm not sure where else you go if you say that activism within unions is a dead end. I'm open to other alternatives if there are alternatives that are more effective. Like I know there are people who work on building worker cooperatives and building other structures and institutions, and I think that's valid work and needed. But, if you're not going to be activist and you're not going to work with the unions, it's almost like, well, what is the point of having these beliefs and ideas, right? If you're not, and maybe that's me, but when I became more like politically savvy, I guess you would say, when I read more and just became really concerned about the state of our world, I felt like I had to do something about it. It was like, okay, now I have this knowledge, I have this awareness that a lot of us are getting screwed by this system. How can I make a difference, right? Like, how can I personally contribute to something? What do I do with this information now? And so I'm willing to accept that in many cases, perhaps activism isn't really doing a whole lot. And I think there are like degrees of quality among activism. Some is more effective than others. But, those are some of the things I'm kind of, wrestling with in relation to this piece.
Yeah, so I think I've got a couple of the things that I wanted to highlight here. And obviously, you can go and read the piece for the full thing. I don't think I'm going to be taking any of it out of context. But so he's got a segment here, what union reformism actually is. The myth I walked into is an old one that committed socialists can transform the labor movement from within. They can seize the unions back from calcified leadership and turn them into engines of class struggle. Whether it is TDU, labor notes, or DSA adjacent efforts, the idea is the same: join, reform, radicalize. But the reality I encountered at UPS was not one of contested power. It was one absent of such. I was sent to the air operation, smaller and more isolated than the main ground hub, and found no visible union presence, no stewards, no accountability. Half my coworkers were dues-paying members, but that meant nothing in practice. When I met my local union's president to say I wanted to build militancy there, he simply appointed me steward once I got seniority. It wasn't a power struggle, it was a vacancy. This, I came to understand, is what union reformism really involves: stepping into empty roles in structures that functionally do not want to be reformed, only managed. You will not fight your way into power, you will be given just enough of it to exhaust yourself. And, you know, like,
that's not totally wrong.
That's not wrong, but it's not wrong at all. In fact, in many, I mean, we've talked about that explicitly, how in so many places where you have organizations that can be vehicles for social change, many of them are calcified, are like they're not fighting institutions. They are barren of leadership. And that presents, in my mind, opportunity, I think. And it takes work, but, and so obviously you'll be given enough of it to exhaust yourself. Yes. What work are you going to do that is going to change the world that is not going to exhaust you?
Right. Even if you believe like reading circles is the answer, like that is what we got to do.
That takes work. It takes work to organize reading circles.
Yeah, like you could really burn yourself out doing that. You could really exhaust yourself doing that, right? Because if you're committed to it, ideally you think, well, we've got to keep growing. We've got to keep building.
We got to get more people in this reading circle.
Right. We have one reading circle, we need 2. Oh, we've got 2 colleges, we need 4, right? Like that's kind of the mentality if you're, aggressive, I think, or committed to some sort of militancy and change.
In 2022, I finally had the leverage to file a grievance against the company over Article 40, the section of the UPS Teamsters contract that governs air operations. The language is vague and full of loopholes, and management has long used it to avoid providing rights and protections enjoyed by all other union-represented employees of the company. I knew from online chatter that air workers had been complaining about this article for years, but nothing had ever been done. So I launched a campaign, Fix Article 40. I built a website, organized a national network of air workers across the country, gathered testimony, and drafted contract proposals for national negotiations. Initially, I expected support mostly from inside the air hubs, but as it turned out, air drivers who shuttle volume from ground hubs to airports were being hit even harder. Their jobs were being gutted. Many had no protections. Some were in tears on the phone. Their fear and desperation were visceral. My original goal was to get air workers from 100 cities across 50 states, all to submit our proposals to the Teamsters headquarters in Washington. The final tally was 50 cities across 25 states. Not bad for a first stab. And it sounds like this guy is a pretty effective organizer. I mean, that, found a need that was widely felt and deeply felt, and did seems like he did some good work. This campaign took off precisely because it gave voice to a group long abandoned by union officialdom, but the success had a bitter aftertaste. There was no real infrastructure to support it. The union had mechanisms, committees, conferences, elections, but they weren't built to listen. They were built to contain. You can do the work, raise the alarm, mobilize your coworkers, and still quietly disappear. Burnout, disillusionment, or just quiet withdrawal is the norm. The union machine doesn't punish you openly. It just absorbs you and lets your effort dissipate. One of the most telling aspects of the Fix Article 40 campaign was its interaction with Teamsters for a Democratic Union. Thankfully, the staffer assigned to assist came from outside the Teamsters, so he wasn't entrenched in the usual internal dynamics. He was sincere and I think genuinely tried his best to contribute to the campaign's success. TDU as an organization, however, was another story. By the time the support was offered, most of the campaign's groundwork was already done. TDU saw the initiative as a good look that didn't require too much investment, and when it came time to push for concrete outcomes, they offered gestures of support, but nothing that risked political capital or challenged the boundaries of their coalition. The deeper issue was structural. Air workers make up only 5% of the UPS bargaining unit, even though air operations generate a disproportionately large share of profit. From an electoral standpoint, one might argue that supporting our cause wasn't worth the investment, but that's precisely the problem. A union should not be judged by what it secures for its most visible or strategically advantageous members. It should be judged by what it secures for its most vulnerable members, from those easiest to ignore, but most in need of protection. If a reform movement balks at defending members because the numbers aren't there, then it's not a reform movement at all. It's just a more efficient manager of the same exclusions. And this underscores a larger tension. The degree to which reform organizations like TDU actually influence the direction of the union or are merely trying to preserve their place within it. What happens when a group like TDU, long the outsider voice of militant reform, actually gets a foothold in power? Does it maintain its militant posture, or does it start playing defense? So he goes on and talks about how he feels like it's kind of, playing more defense. He talks about the formation of Teamsters Mobilized as a primarily part-time UPS Teamster formation, et cetera, et cetera. And, like all of this, I'm willing to take the criticism at face value. I'm sure, as with anything, people on the other side of this conversation are going to have a different view of what happened as a fact of the matter question. But I'm even willing to take it exactly as Matt says it. The question is then what? If the committees, conferences, and elections aren't built to listen, they're built to contain. Then what is the answer? You can change those committees, conferences, and elections to be something that are built to listen, presumably, or you can build red unions, this is what I said to him in our emails, is that, as Adam kind of laid out, I believe that the working class is uniquely positioned to change society because of the power of their production. And so, therefore, if you agree with that premise, if it is true that the working class as such, as the producers of wealth in our economy, are uniquely placed because of the value of their production, then organization of the working class is paramount. And so if you take premise 1 as true, and then you take premise 2 as true, which is that the organization of the working class is paramount, then you're basically kind of, as I see it, left with two paths, right? You're left with two paths. Either you want to try to reform the unions that exist and build them into a stronger, stronger organizations that are capable of laying the groundwork for broader social change, or like you build red unions, and that's a perspective that people have, and maybe it seems like it works sometimes, seems like it doesn't. And the way that I read the history, I feel more convinced that building existing unions into more militant vehicles, into more militant organizations, are that seems to have a better historical, pedigree, in my view. And so he talked about that. He talked about how TDU kind of went into a defensive posture post O'Brien Zuckerman. They became less critical, et cetera. And that is obviously true, right? That the TDU became less critical of the administration once they became part of it. And talked about the formation of Teamsters Mobilized as a primarily part-time sort of formation of the UPS Teamsters, which is an important constituency. And he talks about how, the UPS Teamster, like the leaders of the UPS Teamster kind of groups are, concerned about giving the part-timers too much power because it might threaten kind of the balance of things, because the drivers kind of have all the power right now, et cetera, et cetera. And, I'm happy to kind of stipulate all of that. And then he goes on to talk about who benefits. The people who survive inside this apparatus are not the ones who take risks. They're the ones who come to identify with it. And it's obviously at least partly true. A layer of semi-professional operatives, staffers, and ideologues, many unelected, many unaccountable, continue to set the tone and direction of the labor left. These individuals are not necessarily malicious, but their continued relevance depends on a performance of struggle that never goes too far. Their identities, careers, and routines are anchored to a movement that does not move, and so they maintain a strategic orthodoxy, not because it delivers, but because it keeps them in business, etc., etc. Reform becomes a lifestyle. I don't want to be unfair. There are people embedded in the union who do real work. Some local officers are responsive. Some campaigns create real leverage if you're already inside, if this is your long-term terrain. I'm not saying you should walk away. By all means, I wish you nothing but the best. But if you're standing outside thinking of stepping in, don't. At least not likely. Don't do it on somebody, at least not lightly. Don't do it on someone else's pitch, especially not for political reasons. And so, like he says, I don't want to be unfair. He's not saying like nobody should do it, but he's really, really like poo-pooing it as a strategy for broader social change. If you're standing outside thinking of stepping in, don't. That's his, that's his line. At least not like lightly. Don't do it on someone else's pitch, especially not for political reasons. And like,
I don't necessarily disagree with that wholesale in the sense that it is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And so, no, you shouldn't. If you decide that you want to commit your life to organizing inside the labor movement, that's not an easy decision to make, and it's not a light one to make, and you shouldn't enter that lightly, and you shouldn't go into it thinking it will be easy or glamorous or any of that. So yeah, I can see that position. I just think that you have to weigh the potential cost and benefits. Like, okay, it's going to be hard, it's going to be messy and all those things, but you have the potential, as you said earlier, to really impact people's lives and make a difference in people's lives. And maybe that's worth it for you, maybe it's not, that's not the right fit for you. I'm a big believer that it takes all kinds, and not everyone listening to this show is going to be the exact person who needs to, enter into the unions to reform them and go about that mission. But some of you are, I believe. Some of you are. And we do need talented, committed people willing to organize and grow the labor movement in the United States. I think that is a worthy mission. And no, you shouldn't enter that lightly, but I think it's a mission worth doing. And I'm not sure if he agrees.
Well, it's a mission worth doing, and any mission worth doing, I think, is going to be similarly taxing. His closing paragraphs are, I no longer believe in union reformism as a viable political project. It may yield occasional tactical wins, but as a path to meaningful social change, it costs too much and gives too little. Protect your time, protect your mind, protect your spirit. Don't throw yourself into a machine that survives by wearing people out. You don't owe that to anyone, not even the working class, if such a thing still exists in coherent form. You owe it to yourself to live fully, think clearly, and refuse rules written for you by institutions that will not change. Call the bluff and then walk away. And it's like, it costs too much and gives too little. If that is, it has to be, that statement is comparative. Too much, too little, as compared to what? What is it that you want to do to create meaningful social change that costs just enough and gives just enough? What is it? Like, you have to have, I think, because if you don't have an alternative, then you are pushing people into nihilism. This protect your time, protect your mind, protect your peace.
You could say that.
That sounds like, excuse my French, lib shit. Right?
I think
that's like, I don't know.
Look, I understand that doing this kind of work is very difficult on your mind and your spirit. And people have to pace themselves. People have to take breaks. Sometimes people burn out and they have to step away for their own mental health and physical health. I understand that and respect that. But I think to recognize that on a case-by-case basis is not the same as saying to people, don't even try it in the first place. Yes. I think there is a difference in that. And no, it's not for everybody.
Right.
But I think it is for some folks. I think we really do need some people organizing unions, both within existing structures and organizing new shops. I think that is pretty critical to building up working class power. And, I hear the argument about, is there even a working class, so to speak? And I think, that's a deeper conversation, but we can all agree that there's a lack of a coherent working class that is organized and is united. But by and large, that's not the same as saying there is no working class.
Right.
I think there is a distinction there to be made as well.
Well, and this is the thing that I said that I think if you're going to make an article like this, encouraging people, this is a persuasive essay, obviously. And the goal of the persuasion is to make people less likely to do union reform, to commit their time to that. as a project. And so I do think that if you are a political actor and you have a persuasive essay to pull people out of activity, then you need to, and like you care about politics. Maybe you don't, and maybe that's like, I don't know, the Platypus Affiliated Society. I'd never heard of it before, and maybe it's like a nihilist sort of thing. I don't know, but I do think that if you like care about politics, then you should have like an alternate view that you present people that might have some more hope. And he doesn't. He says, I don't have a roadmap. I'm suspicious of anyone who claims to, but I do think we've neglected a vital terrain, one that earlier generations of socialists understood intuitively, and which we've allowed to rot, the civil social sphere. At its height, the American socialist movement was not just about parties or unions. It was about independent schools, newspapers, mutual aid societies, reading rooms, cultural associations, institutions that built a shared life outside the state and outside the market. They weren't just tools for organizing workers. They were spaces for organizing meaning. They created a material and imaginative infrastructure for socialism to be lived before it could be won. Today, that terrain is mostly abandoned, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like, I agree that the civil social sphere is important, but I think that he misses, and look, I didn't study history, okay? Maybe he had, maybe he knows more than me about this, but the way that I read history is that a lot of these kind of quote unquote independent newspapers or mutual aid societies or cultural associations were funded by the labor movement and were funded by unions or socialist parties. And, I don't think they were like just so independent, freestanding outside of this other broader material context, right? I mean, there were material conditions that existed that allowed these things to thrive. I'm kind of a materialist. I think that there are material reasons that things happen. And so even as he kind of sets it up by saying, I don't have a roadmap, blah, 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 he kind of gestures towards, he's like, union reform, not viable. I'm super skeptical of it as a project. And I don't have a project, but maybe the civil social sphere. And it's like, I'm just like, that is super weird.
Well, and
I think,
and it's not to discount the importance of the things that he lists there, right? Obviously, we think having working class media is really important. That's why we do what we do on this show. Having social and cultural institutions and structures for people,
right,
everyday people to come together and bond and build relationships and solidarity, that's really important. But I think, to your point, it doesn't happen totally isolated from actual worker organizing and without like a real base of economic support and economic power. So yeah, a lot of what he says does resonate. I mean, I've been involved in unions for a dozen years now. I've run into a lot of obstacles. I've run into a lot of people who have titles but aren't necessarily leaders. I've run into a lot of leaders who've been shoved aside and burned out. So a lot of that does resonate. It's just, yeah, I mean, you could say this about really anything, and I appreciated the comment Huntsville Dim Worker left saying, no activity comes without choices, which means some sacrifice.
Exactly.
No one can do everything or be everything, and that is true. Like, for me, I've chosen labor as a primary path. I respect that other people do electoral work, and like that's their thing. As long as we can understand where each other's coming from and hopefully have some synergy in our efforts, I'm fine with that. And for other people, organizing workers at the shop floor or elections aren't really their thing. Maybe it's building mutual aid and building those mutual aid networks. That's great. We need all kinds in our movement. But the idea is to build a broad working class movement of people who recognize their class and recognize their power as a class. And I don't know that you can do that without having workplace organizations. And I don't know that you can have strong workplace organizations if you aren't willing to try to engage with the existing institutions, however flawed or difficult they may be.
I mean, like Huntsville Dim Worker said, like you said, no activity comes without choices, which means some sacrifice. No one can do, can be or do everything. And that's so critical because, and like I started my activity. I think that like electoral politics is kind of the first, when people get like a fire in their belly and say, I want to change the world, electoral politics is kind of the automatic thing that they go to. And that's what I went to immediately. And like, that generated a lot of apathy in me about electoral politics, the 3 or 4 years that I spent kind of really doing that as my path. And so I shifted paths. I still recognize, obviously, the importance of electoral politics. And I think it's like super important that we have people that at least, don't want to destroy working people, don't want to kill working people. I think that's great. And I think that's good. But like, I was convinced by my reading of history and by my experiences on the job that building unions are kind of, like I said to Matt in my email, basically like the best bang per activist hour. It's a sort of mathy way to think about it, but that's how I thought about it. And because as you have a broader goal of building an organization that can fight for broader social change. And then as you are doing that, you're able to fight for people's immediate working conditions, right? Like when I did grievances for the union and I saved somebody's job, like I immediately improved somebody's life and then got them to be more committed to the union. I was able to educate them about what unions are, like as I'm doing this, and and that's kind of the power that you get from that. And so, and it's just it was more meaningful to me to be kind of there directly, kind of affecting people's working conditions instead of, kind of being a stranger, knocking on a stranger's door, asking the stranger to vote for another stranger that neither of us have ever met or will ever meet. And in all likelihood, because I was knocking on doors for Democrats in Alabama, the person was going to lose. But hope that if they didn't lose, that they didn't let us down like everybody else had before. I felt like that was pretty disempowering. I think probably it has to be done. Somebody's got to do it, but it couldn't be me as a primary vehicle. I had to do something that was a little bit more immediately meaningful, and maybe that speaks like to my small attention span. I'm not saying it's a good thing that I can't do electoral politics in Alabama as a primary vehicle for social change, but I'm just kind of explaining where I'm coming from, right? But I have a that's kind of my perspective. I value people that do the other stuff, but I think that union stuff is super valuable. And Jose says it's hard to be a part of union reform when those you think are genuine about their union reform sell out. Talking about the organization in your thumbnail, the TDU, and like no doubt. If you feel let down by reform organizations, no doubt that's going to make it more difficult for you, like personally, but structurally. What does it mean for what should people do as a result of people selling out? I don't think it means give up. Like, I just don't. Bellscore says he's making an argument that the state has co-opted unions in a way that their form has changed, and the historical examples y'all point to existed in a different set of material conditions. As a Marxist, he has a complete different perspective on how things work. The two sides of the argument are going past each other. The state has co-opted unions in a way that their form has changed, and the historical examples y'all point to existed in a different set of material conditions. Yes to the second. I'm not sure about has the state co-opted unions. Is the reason that unions are lethargic because of state co-optation? I don't think so. I think it's more. I think
it's a factor
that maybe a bit, but I think it's just that they've been beat by the employers.
I think you can make the argument that a lot of unions have been really trapped into the legalistic state process, right? And they're scared to do things that are against the law. They're scared to do things that are against the rules, so to speak. And it's kind of a box themselves into a legalistic process through the state, which is obviously not really set up to represent working people. I can hear out that argument for sure. I agree with you, Jacob, that I don't think it's the primary reason.
Right. But then, I mean, even if that is true, even if we accept that, and I don't know why the state co-opting the unions as the thing that co-ops that makes the unions less militant is like relevant in the analysis of like what happens next, because we both agree unions are not as militant as they should be.
Right.
Right. And so then what? Right. Then what? If like, because even if the working class is like less coherent than it was in the 50s and 60s, the working class as a like material set of people exists, I think, in the Marxist analysis. There's a group of people that produce wealth and don't own the means of production, and then there's another group of people who own the means of production and take the wealth, right? So there's a coherent working class in that sense, even though it's like kind of been broken up because of the various social forces, blah, blah, blah. Okay. There is a working class. It has, it wields a certain amount of productive power that gives it unique place in society and unique opportunities to wield that power for lots of reasons. And so if he is disagreeing with us on that, right, does he disagree that there's a working class that contains a lot of power that could be wielded for broader social change? Like, if we disagree on premise one, then, there's like, we have to like really examine, our priors, right? But it's difficult for me to conceive of a person who disagrees with premise one, that the working class produces the value and that production of the value is powerful. If we agree on premise one, then organization of the working class as such is paramount. If it's paramount, how do we do it? Unions seem like an obvious place to go, right? So.
Well, and the last thing I'll say on that is there are plenty of Marxists who have chosen the route of boring from within the labor movement to try to affect change. Again, you can argue that maybe there's a better path, but I'm all ears on what that is. And maybe there is a better path for you individually or for some people over here. But yeah, I don't know that the argument that Matt has made in his essay convinced me to just give up and walk away.
Right. I mean,
if there was a more compelling alternative, that would help. But I think a lot of the criticism rings true, and you can have a lot of those critiques of involvement in basically any existing institutions, as well as trying to build new and original institutions, because that's not easy either. Union Gus pointed out that the IWW got their asses kicked outside of the legal system, and
right.
And so that is something else that we consider is like, it's easy to criticize the unions for being legalistic and kind of playing within the rules, but at the same time, those who have not have mostly been destroyed.
Right.
And
destroyed. And so what does it mean to be destroyed? It means that vehicle for social change and day-to-day improvement in people's lives has been destroyed. Who has made the lives of more people better? Like, even if we just totally forget about everything else, who has made more lives better? The IWW or the rest of the labor movement? It's obviously the rest of the labor movement. And that's why, I've got a lot of respect for the IWW, and I think there's a place for them. And I wish them the best of luck, and I hope that they succeed. And I've been a member, right, for a long time. But I just, I don't think that's, I don't think building red unions is the way to go. I just don't think it's got a great track record. And that's what I care about, right? That's what I have, like things that I want to happen. I want, and fundamentally, like, I want people's lives to be better. I want the world to be better. And so, like, I'm not ideological about how to do that. I am ideological about making that happen. And so how do we do that? I think that, the unions that exist are a great way to go. Platypus thinks that conditions, this is Buskar in Boscar777 in our YouTube chat. Platypus thinks that conditions have degenerated to a point where nothing from the past works and a completely new paradigm needs to arise from within a reconstituted working class, totally separate from existing institutions. None of this is necessarily my personal opinions. I'm just trying to represent their view. I appreciate that. As I said, I'm not familiar with platypus. And so, like, I don't know what that means. What does it mean to have what does it mean to have a completely new paradigm that needs to arise from within a reconstituted working class, totally separate from existing institutions? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's lots of ways. I mean, there's lots of ways you could parse that and come up with something, but I don't know. I would just need to know more, and maybe I need to look into this platypus, these folks more. I don't want to misrepresent them or mischaracterize them, but I don't know. I think there's a point where folks get really philosophical and talk themselves into circles in a way that justifies not actually doing much of anything.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that that's those people, but I have encountered those people out in the world. And so I don't know if that's what it is.
Boscar says, what does that mean is always my problem with the platypus and sublation people. So maybe platypus is related to this sublation magazine. I'm not sure. I've seen some of their stuff before, but and that's why I wanted to have him on too, right? Like I really do feel like I was fair with, I don't feel like I was taking him out of context or anything. But that is why I wanted to have him on the program so he could answer that question. What does that mean? And so it's a bummer that he wasn't able to make it. Appreciate everybody's contribution in the chat. Thank you so much. IWW has a lot to teach federal workers who just had their unions dismantled. Yeah, I agree. My saying the track record of the IWW is like less interesting to me than the rest of the labor movement is not to say, super not to say, I still carry my IWW card, even though I'm not a member anymore. I still have it with me. Not to say nothing to learn. Absolutely not. Lots of things to learn. Lots of valuable things in the wobbly tradition. Very, very valuable things in the wobbly tradition. Okay.
And I'm open, honestly, to folks doing all of the above. Right. I like you, I'm not really boxed in on particular methods. I just want to win. Yep. I just want to win for working people. I want our lives to be better, our communities to be better. I want a future we can really believe in, a better world for my daughter and the generations that come after. And so I'm open to not knowing all the answers, and I'm open to other people having different approaches than me. The idea, hopefully, though, is that we are building power as a working class, as the great majority of people who do the labor in the society, who create the wealth, and who do not have the power or the ownership at this time. And so whether that's moving the ball down the field 3 inches or moving it several yards, I'm down to collaborate with folks wherever they come from.
Adam, there was a new report released last week on working class politics. Can you give us what's the word there?
Yeah, so there was a new report from the Center for Working Class Politics. It was released just in the last week or two, and it digs deep into the political views of working class voters, in particular in the Rust Belt, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. It's called Democrats' Rust Belt Struggles and the Promise of Independent Politics. And now, obviously, we are in Alabama, we are in the Deep South, and we're not the Rust Belt, but there's a lot of similarities in some of the conditions that working folks have been experiencing. Obviously, in the Rust Belt, plant closures have been a big thing. Now, in some ways, a lot of those plants have closed to come down south, right? But the South has also experienced tons of changes from in the manufacturing and textile industries, all sorts of industries. We've also experienced plant closures. And of course, we can relate to low wages and union busting and a political establishment that's more or less ignored working people for decades. So the report comes from, like I said, the Center for Working Class Politics, the Labor Institute, Learn at Rutgers, Jacobin, YouGov. So they were all involved with it. And, basically we're asking what kind of politics actually speaks to working class people, not just in theory, but in practice. And looking at some of the key findings, I mean, it's an 81-page report, so it's quite detailed. You'll have to check it out for yourself. There was a webinar earlier this week where they discussed some of these findings. It was kind of a kickoff event. UAW's president, Sean Fain, was there giving some remarks about it as well. So the first key finding is that economic populism is popular everywhere. The researchers found that strong, unapologetic economic populism that calls out corporate greed and stands up for working people is broadly popular across class, race, and geography. Something they found was that support for economic populist messages had plus 45 net support overall. So you took the support and you subtract the opposition, and it still was plus 45 for economic populist messages. And the stronger, more direct populism outperformed soft versions by about 11 points. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But it especially resonated with non-college, low-income, young, Latino, and insecure workers. So messages that directly name corporate greed and economic elites as the problem outperformed the softer, populist light alternative by around 11 points. So, if you talk strongly as an economic populist instead of like a typical Democratic Party consultant, people actually respond, at least according to this research. And that's something, that resonates in organizing too, right? When you name the boss as a problem, people know what you're talking about. And instead of talking around in circles to avoid blaming who's really to blame. Another key finding is that the Democratic brand is possibly dragging down the message. Across the board, Democratic candidates underperformed in... let me correct this. I will say they looked at 4 states: Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was a little bit of an outlier. But in Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin, Democratic candidates underperformed identical independent candidates by about 8 points and as much as 15 points. In other words, you have 2 hypothetical candidates, one running on the Democratic ticket, one running on the independent ticket. They have the same platform, they're the same, hypothetical here. Who do you prefer? And folks preferred the independents over the Democrats. And the Democrats did real brand damage there, it looked like. So it's not just the message. The messenger does seem to count. The Democratic label appeared to provoke some skepticism that undercut the effectiveness of some of the policies that voters would otherwise support. A few examples that they really point to, one on the independent side is Dan Osborne in Nebraska. Of course, we covered him on this show. We've talked to him a couple times. He was a union mechanic who ran as an independent. He came relatively close to a Republican incumbent out there in Nebraska. Now, something to point out there is there was not a Democratic candidate, right? So it was still a one-on-one race, more or less. But he did overperform a lot of people's expectations. He ran on a strong economic populist message as an independent and came a lot closer than folks would have expected. On the flip side, you also had some Democrats who had fairly strong economic populist messaging, but were defeated, including Sherrod Brown over in Ohio. They also pointed to Matt Cartwright. So what this tells us, I think, is that a lot of working people, when they hear the message of tax the rich and protect the workers from a Democrat, it doesn't always ring true. Not because they disagree, but because they've been burned too many times. And, I think that's a lesson for those of us trying to do working class politics in red states, is that, maybe the problem is sometimes the label and not so much the message. Because as I said earlier, the economic populist message did poll very well. And digging into, okay, so if we accept that the Democratic label is dragging down some candidates, that, maybe there are people who are receptive to progressive economic ideas, but they're turned off by the Democratic label. What's that about? And so about 70% of the voters in the Rust Belt said they have a negative view of the Democratic Party. But the number one reason wasn't that they're too woke, it was that the Democrats don't deliver. Across groups, the most frequent theme was that Democrats fail to get results, don't listen enough, and don't fight hard enough for the people who elect them. So, in a way, that's kind of encouraging, because it means the problem isn't so much that people don't want fairness or solidarity, it's that they don't necessarily trust the people who are claiming to represent it at times. And so I thought that was interesting. There were some folks who, thought that the Democrats were too woke, quote unquote, but it was not the majority. It was by and large about poor performance. And, that is different than saying, oh, well, we're more conservative. We're too conservative for them. They also dug into some of the policies that actually move people. Some of the top policies that they looked at were capping drug prices, stopping corporate price gouging, banning congressional stock trading, eliminating taxes on Social Security income, and raising taxes on the wealthy. Policies that reduced costs, curbed corporate abuse, and held elites accountable consistently performed best. They also took a relatively unknown policy and really tested that to see how popular it would be. And one of the most popular and least known ideas was banning mass layoffs by companies that take public money. In other words, if you're taking our tax dollars, you shouldn't be laying people off. And that proposal held up even when respondents were shown corporate attack ads against it. So that was an idea that's a common sense policy that folks had never really heard of before, never really thought about before. When they heard it, they liked it. And then even when they were given some attack ads against it, it still performed pretty well, right? Especially then if you followed it up with positive messaging. So, that's a pretty common sense working class policy. If you receive public tax dollars, we should have some say-so before you have these mass layoffs. Whether you're getting economic incentives and subsidies or federal contracts or state contracts, if our tax dollars benefit you as a company, we should have a voice before you start laying off a bunch of folks. And they define mass layoffs as 50 or more workers. And of course, the Rust Belt has been disproportionately impacted by that. So, looking at some of the promises and the limits of independent working class politics, they tested a hypothetical organization. This organization does not exist. It's just a hypothetical. The Independent Workers Political Association. And it, described as what it sounds like. An association for political workers who want to be independent of the two major parties. 57% of Rust Belt voters said they'd support creating a new independent workers political association. Support was especially strong among non-college, renters, young voters, and the economically insecure. Even half of Trump voters in some subgroups expressed support. So that means there could be some opportunity to fill the political vacuum left by the Democratic Party's brand problems with more independent candidates. And it does suggest that people are hungry for politics that's not just Democrats versus Republicans, but more us versus them. So, a few things to leave you with. The study focused on the Rust Belt. So what might these dynamics look like in the South, where unions are even weaker and the Democratic brand is perhaps even more toxic? Can independent populism work here, or do we need to rebuild worker power through unions first, or is it do it at the same time? Is it one should come first? Those are some things I think to wrestle with. What kind of roles could community groups and labor councils and local independent candidates play in building up a pro-worker politics from the ground up. And, you know, something that we all know is that if working people don't see anyone fighting for them, they're going to look for it. And we see how dangerous that can get, right? Because that's how, that's how far-right authoritarian politics really takes root inside of the working class, is largely through disillusionment and disengagement. And so it's a really interesting report. I think it's not a one-size-fits-all. I think you have to really look district by district, candidate by candidate, and figure out what you think is the most viable path forward. I think there are some areas where maybe it does make sense to run as a Democrat if you are trying to win. I think there are areas where maybe it may make sense to run as an independent if you're trying to win and mount a viable campaign. I also think there are plenty of districts that are safe Republican, safe Democrat, that are, you're unlikely to win, at least the first go around. So in that case, wrestle with that. What are the implications? Does it make more sense to run as an independent? I do know that there are folks inside of Alabama who are planning or already are running independent working class campaigns. And, in a lot of cases, or at least I know in one case in particular, it's an area where the Democrats haven't even really contested the elections, not in a serious way, in many years. So it's something to chew on, something to consider. I wanted to point out also that this comes on the heels of another report that the Center for Working Class Politics did earlier this summer about working class attitudes. So, between the two, there's a lot to chew on, but I think it gives some hope that strong economic populist messages really do resonate with people, especially working class people. And when we unite around our common interest, there's a real potential there. So I think it's interesting. I think it's something that folks who are partisans of the Democratic Party should really take seriously. I also think it's something that people who are considering running for office should take seriously and look at what is really a viable path. It's clear that a lot of people are tired of politicians putting party above people, and people are sick of the two major parties by and large. And so I think there's an opening for independent politics. There are a lot of downfalls when you take that approach and a lot of barriers. There are some people you may not reach as an independent versus running as a Democrat or a Republican, right? There are loyal bases in those parties who are going to vote for those parties pretty much no matter who they run. In Alabama and in much of the South and a lot of places in this country, ballot access is very difficult for independent candidates. It's easier, typically, to run on a major party ticket in terms of the threshold for entry. In Alabama, for example, a lot of these districts, you could run as the Democrat just by filing the fee because there's not even going to be a primary, right? There's not even going to be enough candidates to have a primary. It's just whoever will put themselves on the line to do it. So that's something to consider. But it seems like there's a lot of interesting data here. I appreciate this report. I appreciate some of the implications of it. And I would love to hear people's thoughts about it.
Got a couple other stories that we wanted to get to today. In Alabama, a citizen was detained by ICE twice. Here, there's lots of reporting on it. I'm just reading from the USA Today one. A U.S. citizen, important, born in Florida. U.S. citizen construction worker was detained by ICE twice. Now he's suing in USA Today by Lauren Villagran. The video actually went viral the first time that he was arrested. The article starts with, an Alabama man is suing the Trump administration after immigration agents arrested him twice in 3 weeks, despite him having a valid real ID, the thing that you got to have, and U.S. citizenship. The new lawsuit alleges that masked immigration agents are targeting people based on their race, ethnicity, or occupation and terrorizing U.S. citizens who fit a certain profile. DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said in an emailed statement to USA Today that allegations that DHS law enforcement officers engage in racial profiling are disgusting, reckless, and categorically false. But reports of Americans being detained in President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown are rising from an Iraq war veteran held for 3 days in Southern California to the citizens whose apartments were ransacked in a recent Chicago raid. That one was crazy. I don't know how much y'all have read about that, but they literally took everybody in the complex out of their house, some of them naked, held them, detained them for hours in the middle of the night. Men, women, children, old people, and like breaking down doors, like destroying their personal property. U.S. citizens. Crazy.
In the name of safety.
In the name of protecting U.S. citizens, ostensibly. So the fellow's name is Leonardo Garcia Venegas. He said, I'm suing because it's not right what they did to me. I don't want it to happen to anyone else. The lawsuit is asking a judge to block DHS policies that allegedly permit agents to target people on private property without a warrant who fit a racial or ethnic profile. Garcia Venegas is also seeking unspecified damages. And so then they talk about the facts of the case. Back in May in Foley, Alabama, he was preparing to lay the foundation for a new home, and 5 agents in camouflage, 3 wearing masks, rushed onto the work site around 8 a.m. There were 2 crews on site, according to the complaint, and 5 Latino men, including Garcia Venegas, were there to set the foundation. A separate crew of folks were there to deliver the concrete. And the complaint alleges that without a warrant, officers ran right past the white and black workers, of which there were multiple, and went straight for the Latino workers. When Garcia Venegas started filming the arrests with his cell phone, an agent grabbed him by the arm and forced him to the ground. 2 more agents rushed over and held him to the ground. He shouted that he was an American citizen. I'll show you my papers now, he told them. The first agent fished Garcia Venegas' wallet out of his pocket and found his real ID, an active driver's license only available to U.S. citizens and lawful residents, compliant with federal guidelines. And according to the complaint, agents alleged the ID was fake and held him in handcuffs for more than an hour. And then it happened again. Not 2 weeks after he returned. Because he stayed off the job for a while because it like shook him, right? As you know, these guys, jackbooted thugs coming up and wrestling you to the ground, detaining you for over an hour, shook him. So he took a couple of weeks off. Then he was back. On June 12th, Garcia Venegas was working inside a partially finished home, headphones on, listening to music. Agents spotted him working through the bedroom window, thought he fit the DHS's generalized profile of an undocumented worker, and entered the home through an unlocked door without a warrant. They led Garcia Venegas outside. He showed them his Alabama-issued real ID, and again, they said it could be fake. They marched him to their vehicle and detained him for 30 minutes before determining his real ID was authentic. I mean, this is just... how do you say that's not racial profiling? An American citizen 2 times in 3 weeks being detained because he looks like an undocumented immigrant. I mean, it's just crazy. Not good. And somebody said, here, who is this person? Grace Resendez McCaffrey, publisher of a Spanish-language newspaper distributed in Baldwin and nearby counties, said, "You are left to prove you are not undocumented," right? We're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, and yet brown folks have to prove that they are not undocumented. That is the reality that they are living in right now. And so there you go. That's why he's suing. And this also brings up, just the generalized sort of impact that this is having on the economy. There was some reporting in AL.com. Alabama construction industry may face devastating worker shortage under Trump administration crackdown. And this is really funny. We've been talking in the program about, there's some Marxists have some ideas and we agree with some of them, and we disagree with others about different things. But this article the quotes that are attributed to the construction industry folks are really just almost like what a Marxist would say capital wants, right? Because the left-wing critique of the immigration policy of the United States has always been that capital wants not open borders. Capital actually does not want open borders. Capital wants porous borders that people can get in without rights. They want a huge section of the workforce to be coming here without any rights to live in the country so that they can exploit them. They can pay them less than they're worth. They can subjugate them. They can put them in conditions that most people would not agree to. They can sexually harass them. They can verbally and physically abuse them. And then, if an immigrant gets uppity about it, they can call ICE and get them kicked out of the country and then replace them with another undocumented immigrant, right? That's actually what capital wants. Capital does not want open borders where everybody has an equal right to be here. They want porous borders where an underclass of people are able to come without rights. And that's basically what these construction industry leaders say in front of God and everybody. It's just crazy. So here's what they say, quoting from them. We want to work with President Trump. Harrison, who owns a construction company in Tuscaloosa, said he has heard the same concerns about a workforce shortage from leaders in other industries, including manufacturing and agriculture. They have talked to elected officials about the problem and possible solutions. We've been to Montgomery, we've been to Washington, Harrison said. We sat down with all of our representatives that would sit down with us, which was the majority of them. And I just want to flag that for people. These construction industry bosses were able to sit down with the majority of their elected representatives. How many people can say that they can secure an audience, even secure a much less like get them to do what they want? How many people, how many types of organizations can secure an audience with a majority of your elected representatives? Not very many. Sat down with both of our senators, Britt and Tuberville. All right? Securing an audience with them is not nothing, right? And our cause was not, hey, we want everybody to get citizenship. That's not what we're wanting. What the industry wants, Harrison said, is to better identify the bad actors and create a way for other immigrants to remain in the country and work under certain conditions. Those conditions being basically that they want, these people not to have rights, for the bosses to be able to do whatever they want and exploit them. And they even talk some about a little further down in the article. They say that the idea, Harrison said, would include a requirement for undocumented workers to go through a screening process to determine they are who they say they are, and then pay restitution, perhaps $15,000 over a 4-year period, in order to be able to remain in the country and work. As if working in this country, when you're an undocumented immigrant, the vast, vast, vast majority of them pay income taxes. They pay their taxes, right? But they do not have a subsequent right to get the benefit of those taxes. They do not qualify for Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security. So they pay all this money into the system, and then they don't get any of that out of it. So as if that's not good enough restitution, he wants another $15,000 again, and on the worker, not on Harrison. Harrison's not saying that they should have to pay restitution because they exploited an underclass of people. In some cases, even, yes, at the expense of immigrants who are here legally or native-born citizens. They exploited these people, and they don't have to pay restitution. It's the undocumented immigrant who this guy wants to pay restitution. Because as if he has been wronged. I mean, it's just so, the more I think about it, the more upset I get about this and this guy. So yeah, I mean, that's basically it, you know. So they're like really talking about how, you know, what's going on is bad. All these immigration raids are bad for business. We want to continue to be able to exploit these people, but make sure they don't have rights, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, really bad. Not good. What's going on here?
And those are the reasonable moderates, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, Benjo says, I still haven't seen a single boss get arrested. That's true. That's true. Did you see about the apartment building that was invaded by ICE in Chicago? Yeah. Saw that. Talked about that just a bit.
Yeah, and I saw the Iceman's comments. You're welcome to call in at 844-899-TVLR. Tell us what's on your mind. Welcome to.
Yep. What good is a union if everyone can come here? Use your brain. Yelling isn't convincing anybody. Minnie Mao. Not a Maoist, actually. But, you know, and so this is the thing. I am not saying that we should have open borders. Not saying that, right? I mean, I think that there's an argument that might cause like too much problems. I'm not saying that. I don't really have like an ultimate thing and like an ultimate like exact policy prescription about immigration. Although I do think that, you know, we could say that it would the ideal thing if we lived in an ideal world, and maybe we'll never live there, right? But in an ideal world, anybody could live kind of wherever they want to, right? I mean, that would be, and if you don't agree with anybody could live wherever they want to, then you're not, you know, you're kind of fundamentally opposed to kind of freedom, right? That would be the ideal, and there are reasons that we can't have ideal things, right? And I recognize that, but what I'm saying is that it is bad that we have an underclass of people who can be exploited by the boss, and it would be better, especially for the ones that are already here, if we gave them legal status so that then they could assert their rights. And I mean, immediately, like overnight, if you gave these people legal status, their working conditions would improve immediately, because then they can go and work anywhere else, right? You immediately improve their working conditions, and by proxy, you increase competition among employers in the area, and everybody's working conditions are going to improve. Now, this is not an argument about how many more people should come, how many more people should go, blah, 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 blah. But the people that are here, especially the ones that have been here for a long time, contributing to the economy, et cetera, like there's not reason to get rid of them. We have had a very low unemployment rate. We have the highest unemployment rate now since the pandemic started under Trump. Native-born workers actually have a lower employment rate now than they did a year ago. And so the theory that going around and terrorizing immigrants is going to redound to the benefit of native-born people, like that theory is being put to practice now, and it is not working. We are not seeing more American-born people getting jobs. Actually, less native-born people have jobs now than they did a year ago, both as an absolute number and as a percentage of the workforce.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not even working on those grounds. But you know, just as a humanitarian, even if like it theoretically worked, that terrorizing all these people and campaign of mass deportation somehow, you know, modestly improve the employment statistics, like for everyone who's left, like, is it really worth it? Right? Because there are so many ways it's damaging the economy and damaging the working class. But most importantly, just as a humanitarian, like I can't justify what we're seeing. It's not right. It's just not right to do this to people. I don't have any beef with anybody because of where they're born. Period. We don't get to choose where we're born. It's part of the reality. We don't get to choose that. And if people came to this country desperate, broke, striving for a better life. Why should I be mad at them? They haven't done anything to me.
Right.
Haven't done anything to any of us.
And I mean, it is worth pointing out that that is how, for the vast majority of like white people in this country, our ancestors came during a period where America did actually have open borders, right? And so now open borders in the past, you know, was less disruptive because it was more difficult to move places. It is easier to move now. And so that's another reason that open borders as a concept would potentially create more strain than it did then. But just as a fact of the matter, you know, again, let's talk about facts. America had open borders until 1882. My family came here before 1882. My family, and even from 1882, there was only one immigration law, even in 1882, and it was just like Chinese people can't come here. Everybody else is fine. If you're Chinese, you can't. And so we didn't get any more immigration laws until, what was it, like the 1910s or 20s or something? And so, you know, for most of us, most white people in this country, you know, when people talk about like my people did it the right way, your people did it literally exactly the way that other people, that undocumented immigrants are doing it now. And they just came here. They just came here. And that's how it happened. There was no process. So
yeah, Quirky Geek Girl says blaming immigrants is the oldest trick in the book to distract you from what the bosses are really doing. Amen, sister.
All right. We're 1 minute early. I think we're ready to wrap up. Appreciate everybody tuning in. If you didn't get a chance to call in or you're tuning in to us after we're off the air, 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. You can leave a voicemail at any time. You can also leave us a written message at tvlr.fm/contact. Subscribe to our newsletters, Boss Watch and Last Week in Southern Labor at tvlr.fm. Make a donation at tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report, and buy our merch at tvlr.fm/store. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. We're going to be back next week with more stuff to talk about. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Solidarity, y'all.